board helps make them a reality. I want to talk a little bit about the benefits to the community as a whole, on top of the benefits to individual tenants. Good cause will help tenants assert their legal rights to safe housing conditions and fair treatment from their landlord. If they're experiencing housing hazards like chipping lead paint or leaks, they can discuss the problem with their landlord or report the problem to the authorities without fear of retaliation in the form of eviction or rent hike. This will result in better health and safety for individual tenants and stability for the community as a whole. By offering tenants greater stability, Good Cause lets tenants establish deeper roots in their community, allowing them to get more involved in local civic discussions without worry that, come their next lease renewal, they will have to move to another jurisdiction. Good Cause therefore serves to increase renters' capacity to fully participate in activism and local democracy. Third, establishing Good Cause eviction protection rewards New Paltz's responsible property owners while disincentivizing real estate companies with ill intent from buying properties in the area. Finally, preventing evictions has tremendous impacts on the life chances of renter households, which scale up as we think about establishing village-wide protections. The cost of eviction, personal and collective, societal and governmental, emotional and financial, are tremendous. Actions like Good Cause eviction protection can create stability and upward trajectories for both the families affected and for New Paltz as a whole. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The Community Service Society strongly supports the proposed Good Cause legislation and encourages the village board to approve it.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to keep alternating between list in person and list on Zoom. So next we have Leonard Loza.
Good evening. My name is Leonard
Can you
Loza.
please leave your mask on when you're speaking?
And the folks won't be able to hear unless you get kind of in the range of this.
Let's see what I can do with my glasses.
I know, I feel the pain.
Okay.
I'm blind today.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Loza. I began renting to students when I was 27. I'm now 70. That means 43 years of renting. I've had approximately 4,500 tenants. 4,500. Not one eviction. Not one eviction did I ever have to take anyone to court. I live in the village on North Oakwood Terrace. Interesting thing is, I've already got people calling for 2022. I have people calling for 2022. Most of my tenants stay for 2 or 3 years, or if they hook up with some other friends, then they leave. I love it when they stay. I don't have to paint. I don't have to clean. Everything moves on. We will begin taking applications in mid-November. Tenants will be told that are presently living in our housings that they have a decision to make. They will get notice in early October. There's something called the bundle of rights in the real estate business. Right of possession, that's to possess the property. Right of control, to use it in any legal manner. Right of exclusion, who may enter the property. Right to derive income. And right of disposition, which means you can get rid of the property one way or another. I believe that this law is directly infringing upon those. When one property is out of compliance, if you have more than one property, you have a problem because you're not allowed to collect rent from any of the other properties. How dare they do that? I don't understand it. 5%, how did they get 5%? I really don't know. When you control the rent rates, you control the value of the real estate. For many of us, that's our lifeblood. Last thing I'd like to know is how much has been spent on this to comprise the document that we've got in front of us now. So much of this information that's in this document is arbitrary and capricious. And that is a term that will be used if it needs to be used to take it to the next level. Thank you.
Next we have, so we're going to skip applause, please. It's a good way to spread more droplets and waste more time. So next we had Tim Collins, who is virtual.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I should probably say that I appreciate the gentleman who's apparently a responsible landlord at New Paltz, has not had 4,500 eviction, or has had 4,500 tenants over the last several years without a single eviction, which means that this law would very unlikely affect him at all if he's not evicting anyone. I think that you have to look at something. I should probably say a little bit about my background. I'm an attorney. I work in New York. I've done some cases in Westchester. I'm somewhat familiar with what goes on in the Hudson Valley. But I have to tell you on a personal level.
So order for a second, everyone. Sorry, Tim, please continue. And also, Ari, can you let people in? Over there, no longer a co-host.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Continue.
Thank you. Here's the thing, just on a personal level. I used to be the executive director of the New York City Rent Guidelines Board. I've heard thousands and thousands of tenants and owners testify about the problems they face, their concerns about security in their homes and about making a reasonable return on their properties. I also get phone calls on a daily basis in my law firm for the last 25 years from tenants who run into problems. An unjust eviction law is sort of like an insurance policy. Not all landlords are going to be going after tenants arbitrarily. Not all landlords are abusive. But if you happen to be in that position, it's a hell of a painful place to be. And I have had tenants call me in tears, breaking down, losing their homes, lacking security because of a little dust up or difference of opinion they had with an owner, because they, needed something done and the owner felt that they were not being diplomatic enough about it, sometimes for even more nefarious reasons. This is something that's real. Doesn't happen to every tenant every day, but it happens enough so that an unjust eviction law makes a lot of sense. And it has to be coupled with an unconscionability standard for rent. Otherwise, an owner would be able to wrench the tenant out of the apartment simply by raising the rent. Now, in terms of property rights, you should all know that landlord-tenant relationships have been in a state of change in the state of New York for over a century and a half. In fact, the greatest sea change started in the Hudson Valley with the anti-rent wars in the 1840s. Huge changes in ownership rights by small farmers who ended up in rebellion. Those changes went on and accelerated in the latter part of the 19th century. And I could just say the legal protections over the past century, lease terms governing tenure, habitability, evictions, and rent adjustments have largely been supplanted or transformed by legislation and court rulings. Even in the absence of rent regulations, the most strict form, the common law lease of a century ago no longer exists. Leases once created independent covenants for delivery of possession and payment of rent. Tenants were thus obligated to pay even when possession was not delivered. Or services were not maintained. Leases now involve mutually dependent contractual obligations. If possession or services are not provided, rent may be withheld or abated. A host of other lease terms have been altered by statute and court rulings. Lease provisions allowing self-help evictions are unlawful. Lease provisions waiving a landlord's obligation to maintain habitability are unlawful. Restrictions on roommates, subletting, and pets are now governed by statute. Moreover, New York tenants now have affirmative rights to organize with other tenants, to receive protection against retaliatory eviction, and to prevent landlords from engaging in various forms of discrimination. And there's a huge list. I won't go into it. I think it's important to note, I should mention on the issue of whether or not New Paltz has the power to do this. I see that Legal Aid produced an excellent memorandum which addressed this directly and I think comprehensively. I won't speak to that. But I do believe that it is lawful, that it's not preempted by New York law. And even if there's a battle on the horizon, it's a battle worth having. Housing, I think, is a human right. That doesn't mean everybody has a right to any type of housing they want for nothing. It means that under responsible circumstances, fairly regulated by law, they should be able to stay in their homes. And that's what this bill does. I note that, New Paltz has sort of a progressive tradition when it comes to issues of human rights. In February of 2000.
I'm going to cut you off. Oh,
okay.
I'm going to cut you off in about a minute-ish tops.
I just
want
want
interrupted you in the beginning.
Okay, thank you. I just think you should fall back on New Paltz's progressive traditions. In 2004, only one state in the United States allowed same-sex marriages. And at that time, a 26-year-old mayor from New Paltz, New York, performed the first same-sex marriage in New York. He was brought to court, and ultimately the Ulster County District Attorney, after a year and a half, dropped all charges. And it turns out that Jason West's progressive activism on behalf of what we all recognize as a fundamental human right at this time was prescient and moving in the right direction. Unlawful eviction laws and unconscionability standards are moving in the right direction, and they concern a human right, and New Paltz should follow its tradition of being in the forefront of this type of change. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anyone gets cut off at all, just in the interest of things, you can always send your written statement, to assistant@villageofnewpaltz.org. And we keep these open for a long time. So next up in person, we had Cody Clausen.
I apologize, I was signing in.
Oh, you were just signing because you're excited to volunteer for the ZBA. Awesome. Well, we're excited too. We'll get to that. So then next was Dan Scher.
I want to thank the members of the board and Lo for having this, the hard work you always do, and for having this meeting. I'm actually rising to oppose this law. I want to draw the board's attention to something that's already becoming very obvious, that the people who live in New Paltz and know it best are opposed to it, and the people that are coming from New York City and just have this general idea of what would be good, but don't really know the New Paltz situation, are the only ones that are speaking in favor of it.
Let's just keep it chill.
Okay. My fear about this law is twofold. One, I really don't think it's necessary. I also have been a landlord now for about 10 years. I've had not anywhere near Lynn's numbers. And I've also never had an eviction. I rent to students. And my fear is that good landlords will be forced to act bad. And I will tell you the two things that I'm headed toward if this law becomes law. First of all, I will raise rent 5% every single year. Whether I collect it or not, I don't know, but I'm not going to wait till I have to go to court to do that. The second thing I think it might happen, I mean, Lynn mentioned that this might end up in court, which would be expensive for the village and for everybody. But I would probably file eviction proceedings against every single one of my tenants so that I could keep the good ones, but I would have time to evict the bad ones. I have never had to go to court to try to evict anybody, but I don't want to find out, I rent August to August, I don't want to find out that the student, whatever, doesn't want to leave or so forth when I've already rented the property. So I would be filing eviction notices for every single student I have. So Len mentioned that I think the idea that if one house is not in compliance and you have multiple houses, all of them are, and I think the 5% to call that unconscionable is just plain wrong. But again, I just want to stress, it's very easy to think of, oh, these innocent, wonderful angel tenants versus these devil landlords. But I really think the situation in New Paltz is that for the most part, we have good tenants, we have good landlords, and they're kind of together against tenants or landlords that are horrible. I don't know any terrible landlords. I just happen not to. I've only known a very few really terrible tenants. Most recently, I've had one who's literally been thumbing his, I mean, literally, I went to talk to him and he went like this. Because he knows he can't be evicted. He's had a full-time job throughout the pandemic. He works in healthcare, at a nursing home, and he's just refused to pay rent. So that's been our experience, and I really urge the board to listen to the experience of the people that are here in New Paltz. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. All right, next we have Mohammed Serta coming in on Zoom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to read a statement here the way I prepared. I'm a village landlord. I've been a village landlord, Village of New Paltz landlord for almost 10 years. I've never evicted anyone or been to court. In those 10 years, I've also only had to keep partial security for 1 out of 10 properties. And that was the most recent year. That's because they made improvements to the electrical without permission from me and without getting a licensed electrician. Okay, a group of landlords has been meeting to discuss the proposed good cause eviction law. We would like to address a number of specific concerns with the proposed law section by section. Section 129-14. This section states that landlords cannot collect rent if they are not in compliance with the registry law. While we agree that all rental buildings should be registered, there are already penalties in place for non-compliance. Even more troubling, this section says that landlords can ask for back rent once compliance is achieved, but tenants cannot be evicted if they refuse to pay this back rent. This seems illogical and unfair. There's also already rules in place for non-compliance that our building inspector oversees and acts on. Section 129-5. This section states a tenant can't be evicted during non-compliance with the registry law. Again, why include regulations related to the registry law within a good cause eviction law? And the section's provision that a landlord's other buildings are subject to the same no eviction restrictions, even if they are in compliance in those buildings, is just ridiculous. Why should landlords with multiple buildings be treated differently than landlords with one? Same comment for those housing code violations in the second paragraph. Okay. Section 129-16. Example A states that an owner-occupied premise with less than 2 units are exempt. So is it just 1 unit? Do you mean less than 3 units? Are you not counting the owner-occupied units? We'd like clarification on this. Section 129-18. There seems to be an inherent contradiction here regarding what rents are to be considered unconscionable. In section 1, it states a tenant's ability to pay rent may be considered by the judge. In section 4, it says changes in market rate rents may be taken into account. And in section 5, it seems to cap rent increases at 5%. Each of these would have dramatically different impact on what an unconscionable rent actually is. This needs significant clarification, and in any case seems too subjective. The rents we are allowed to charge in our own buildings is left to the whims of a single judge. So this group of landlords that met together and came up with this, we are all in agreeing that capping it at 5% is going to force us to then, just like Dan say, raise rent by 5% every year. For myself, I haven't raised rent in 5 years on any of my buildings, specifically during COVID. But with the risk that this law is going to put into place, we're all going to have to raise rent 5% every year.
If you could start wrapping it up.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up by
But,
saying
you know,
that
you could take another minute, just, I'm letting you know, warning.
that's fine. So in this meeting, there must have been 14 to 15 landlords. We all had, a lot of us had multiple units, some had single units. None of us are in favor of this. A lot of us have been doing this for many years. In the 5 years, we took a poll, and in the 5 years, out of all these landlords who have over 600 bedrooms, okay, there's only been 6 proceedings that went to court. So in 5 years, 600 bedrooms, okay, 6 people went to court. We really feel that this law is attempting to fix a problem that's not a problem in New Paltz. And this is someone else's agenda that it is not reflective of the real community. That's all.
Great. So next we have in person Rogers School. Can you see the clock? It's easier than me.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Am I clear?
Yeah,
I
thank
will
you.
speak briefly and to the point. My name is Roger School. I've been professionally active in addressing behavioral health needs of this community for over 30 years. I've been very involved. I'm a landlord in the village and the town of New Paltz. Many individuals are speaking for and against the implementation of this law today. I will address a few points against the proposed law. In the justification section of the proposed law, you state that many Residential tenants in New Paltz are being evicted from their homes. Despite multiple requests from the landlord community for data backing up this justification, the village is and has been unable to provide a shred of data. How can you justify it and change a change in any law without the use of data to show the need to change? Justification of this law lacks any scholarship. You speak about the basic rights to renew a lease. A lease is a legally binding contract. Unless a lease has a renewal clause, there is no basic right of renewal. The signing of a lease binds all parties to the terms stated in the lease. This law is in opposition to New York State contract law. The village is taking a totalitarian position on interpreting contract law. Non-renewal lease of a lease, as per the lease contract, is not an eviction. In applying this law, the needs of the student housing should be considered differently from the needs of family and individual housing. Student housing is not meant to be long-term housing. A group of students rent out rooms in a house. Each year, a new self-formed group rents or re-rents the property for a year. At the end of each year, properties are repaired, cleaned, painted, and prepared for the next group of students. As a landlord in the village, I do not displace students to gain greater profits. My mortgage, taxes, insurance, electric cable, fuel, garbage, plowing, building, and grounds maintenance increase each year. On the average, I reach each room $10 a year. I would not consider that gouging. The law states that any rent increases exceeding 5% is unconscionable, and that the rate of increase is relative to the tenant's ability to afford the increase. Under this rationale, a 1% increase, a 0.5% increase, or even a 0.25% increase might be more than the tenant can afford to pay. No increase might be more than the tenant can afford to pay. The tenant might not be able to afford to live in New Paltz. While this is heartbreaking, landlords are not the Department of Social Services. You cannot legislate landlords into taking losses to subsidize tenants. That is the domain of each landlord. I myself do take tenants' financial needs into consideration at times. I have not raised the rents of my family housing outside the village of New Paltz since COVID started, so as not to increase the financial stress. Yeah, outside the village since COVID started, so as not to increase the financial stress on my tenants. I also accept Section 8 payment for one of my apartments in the village. The fee is significantly under the market value for the unit. You state that the good cause eviction legislation codifies an existing practice in the New Paltz Justice Court. You then insinuate that landlords are removing tenants without first obtaining an order from the court. This proposed law dishonestly manipulates the reader of the law into believing that landlords are acting outside the court system to evict tenants. I have been a landlord for close to 30 years.
So if you could start to wrap up, just
Yeah,
because
this
it's
other
been
person
over
got 10 minutes, so please don't harass me.
Oh, I don't think they went for 10 minutes, but
I
sure.
have evicted 2 tenants, both of them over the years for good cause, outrageous good cause. Under the definitions of Section E, the proposed law provides a definition of disabled person. What determines if a person actually has a condition that substantially limits a major life activity? I'm in support of taking the needs of special needs persons into consideration. But a historic trail of documentation, not a doctor's note, should be required before any person be considered to fall into that category. One doctor note is inadequate and easily obtained to show disability. Your lack of appropriate definitions for the language used in many sections of this proposed law, coupled with your failure to utilize or provide any collected data, renders this law inappropriate and lacking any credible justification. If you want to find ways to improve the rental environment in the village, sit down with the student rental landlords, non-student rental landlords, and have an adult conversation. Collect evidence-based data and draft proposals that have legitimacy based on that data. The data must be verifiable and legitimate. Only then can you determine the need for any legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So next up, we have Michael McKee, virtual.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to speak in favor of the bill to prohibit evictions without good cause. My name is Michael McKee. I'm the treasurer of the Tenants Political Action Committee. I have been a tenant organizer and advocate for 51 years, and I have worked extensively across the state, in all parts of the state with local tenant groups, and have advocated for tenants' rights at the state level and the local level. I'm speaking in support of the amendment that would prohibit evictions without good cause. You have a chance in New Paltz to make history, be the second municipality in the state to give tenants this basic protection and to bring some stability to your housing market. A couple of things about what good cause is not. It is not rent control. Unfortunately, it's not as strong as rent control. Essentially, what it does is it gives tenants a defense to an unfair eviction or to an arbitrary or unfair rent increase. But it's not self-enforcing. The tenant would have to, first of all, make a decision to contest the eviction or contest the rent increase. And it would be up to a judge to determine if the eviction were to be allowed or if the rent increase were okay or not. And the 5% is not a cap. It is a threshold beyond which the landlord can prove that it was justified for other reasons. It's what's known as a rebuttable presumption, which means it's not automatic. I think the most important thing about good cause eviction is that it gives tenants the ability to complain about conditions and to assert their rights, including organizing to get repairs where you have bad conditions and irresponsible landlords. I really don't understand how any landlord who can testify before you tonight that they have 4,500 units and they've never evicted a tenant. I find that extraordinary. They're not going to be affected by this bill. So I just don't understand why there's opposition.
Please, sorry to interrupt you. Just everyone's being kind of loud. We got to keep the thing going. Yeah, no, he started at 7:57, so he's 1 minute. Go on.
Okay, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I commend you for introducing this bill. I urge you to pass it. And we will look forward to working with you in the future to make sure that tenants have rights. And I really do appreciate what New Paltz is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Sorry for the interruption. That was
All right, I'm quite used to it.
Next, we had Lillian School.
Okay, good evening. My name is Lillian School. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and a business owner. I have lived and worked in New Paltz and surrounding areas for the past 30+ years. I've raised my family in New Paltz. My entire professional work has been in service, helping others in New Paltz and surrounding communities who come from socially, ethnically, politically, and economically diverse backgrounds. I'm also a landlord for the past 25+ years, presently owning 2 student houses and 1 apartment in the village of New Paltz. During this whole 25-year period, I have evicted 2 people for very good reasons. I am not in support of this local law amending Article 2 of Chapter 129 Housing Standards, also known as the good cause eviction. This proposed law, as written, is all anecdotal and provides no data. Issues stated are mostly opinions. There are no facts. In the interest of transparency, the information that I share tonight is my personal experience as a landlord, my history and observation as a resident of the village of New Paltz for over 2 decades. This local law filing to the state is describing New Paltz landlords as greedy and unconscionable in their tenant-landlord relationships. That is, providing inferior housing accommodations, charging overmarket rents, instigating unfair evictions, denying lease renewals in order to displace individuals and families, all for the purpose of gaining higher profits. How twisted this thinking is. If you have evidence of this and landlords are hurting tenants, by all means, the village should step in and help those who are being victimized. The first 2 paragraphs of your proposal, as written to the state, only serves to divide landlords and tenants and divide landlords and village government. This is not the underpinning of a healthy and fair working relationship with all sides working for the same end, which is good, safe, and affordable housing. The wording of this amending law is divisive and punitive towards landlords. As for landlord profits, I believe it is the landlord who purchases the property, pays all the bills, mortgages, pays for maintenance, upkeep, repairs, plowing, landscaping, cleaning, garbage, recycling, taxes, Wi-Fi, internet service. A tenant-landlord relationship is supported by a contract called a lease, which before signing should be agreeable and fair to both parties. A landlord has the right to govern and maintain their own property, and tenants are expected to care for the property they live in. As a landlord, those are my expectations. I support and understand protecting tenant rights, but stripping landlords of their right to govern, that is what is unconscionable. What is also unconscionable and outrageous is that no landlord, quote, shall file for an eviction during any period of non-compliance. A landlord of multiple rental properties shall not file for an eviction of residents at any one property during any period of non-compliance at any one of their rental properties. Fair? I think not. This proposed law is dishonest. What's behind all this? I learned in graduate school when analyzing articles, not to question so much the written word of the article as to understand who the author of the article is and to question the author's motives. From my first
Could you please
reading
start to
of
wrap
this
it up,
proposal-
please?
I have a couple more minutes.
Everyone has 3 minutes.
And we've already gone over
At
2
the
minutes.
beginning of the meeting, you let somebody speak for 10 minutes, then you need to let everybody speak for 10 minutes.
There's been a timer this whole time. Please don't be rude to the speaker. Go
I'm
on.
giving a little
The
leeway.
proposal is clear. The author does not like landlords. The author is doing to landlords what she accuses landlords as doing to their tenants. The author wants to take away landlord rights. Read between the lines, as it strongly implies the village of New Paltz manage, or should I say control, every aspect of landlord properties, other than paying expenses, of course. We do not live in a totalitarian society.
Thank you.
This
So next up,
proposed
we have,
amendment of the housing
I'm sorry,
standards
Lillian,
is
could you
obstruction.
submit it to Ariana? Because we have a lot more and that was a good solid 5 minutes.
We have so many people to speak tonight, we're never gonna get out of here.
There's been a timer.
We have on the list. Can you tell us how many people we have on the
It
list?
looks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then getting to the written comments.
Y'all want to be here for 3 hours?
Yes, I've been in school meetings for a lot longer than that.
So just please summarize and wrap it up real quick. You know, it's been a solid 5-minute comment. Just finish up, please.
Okay. This proposed amending of the housing standards is a smokescreen. This is an anti-landlord proposal, not a proposal to establish workable tenant-landlord solutions to providing more affordable and safe housing. Non-renewal of leases by landlords is not a de facto eviction. As is stated in paragraph 3 under justification, this proposed good cause eviction legislation codifies an existing practice in New Paltz Justice Court landlord-tenant proceedings. If this proposal codifies an existing practice, why are we reinventing the wheel? If tenants have been taking advantage of, if this proposal, okay. Okay. Over the years, if tenants have been taken advantage of for so long as to require this good cause eviction amendment, why hasn't the building department attended to tenant grievances over the years, cited bad landlords and condemned inferior substandard housing? Over the years, poor government leadership and half-time mayors, perhaps, inadequate department staffing, perhaps, self-centered politicians with self-serving agendas, perhaps. This current good cause eviction legislation smacks of a vendetta against landlords to take attention and responsibility away from the real culprit. New Paltz village government over the years has not been doing their job. Presently, our current tenant landlord committee is being run by the village deputy mayor, unethical. Historically, I believe the village of New Paltz has tied developers' hands. Developers are fearful of arduous and long vetting processes. The word in the larger building community is, it takes forever to get things done and approved in New Paltz. I will build elsewhere. There is no consensus. New Paltz politics at this point has become fractured.
Okay, Lillian, you can submit the rest. That'd be wonderful. Great. So next we have Judith Goldner, virtual.
Hi, my name is Judith Goldner.
My
I'm
timer
the,
just ran to the bathroom, so let me just, sorry, take a note of what time. Sorry. Okay, now you can start.
that's okay. My name is Judith Goldner. I'm the attorney in charge of the Civil Law Reform Unit at the Legal Aid Society. I have lived in Greene County, New York for 26 years. I have worked on landlord-tenant issues for over 30 years. I helped draft the Housing Stability Tenant Protection Act in Albany, as well as the state law that would, the proposed state law that would provide good cause eviction. I also worked with Albany legislators in passing their good cause law, which was a first of its kind in the state. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I was going to devote my testimony to talking about the legal ways that the reason why this is a legal proposal. I know there have been some that say that this is preempted by state law. That is not correct. New York municipalities have broad home rule powers. There is no express preemption or field preemption. I've submitted a legal memo to the town attorneys for them to see that, in fact, in this area of landlord-tenant law, the town of New Paltz has broad authority to propose such a law. I understand that some think that the HSTPA, by regulating tenancies that are not subject to good cause, preempts the town from so acting, but there will continue to be tenancies under your law and throughout the state that will not be subject to good cause. You have exceptions in your law. And for those tenancies, provisions of the HSTPA will still apply. I also understand that some think that this excuses tenants who agree to lease extensions from complying with their lease obligations. And nothing, again, could be further from the truth. The HSTPA does require, which is a state law, requires landlords to mitigate if a tenant breaches their lease. But if a landlord is unable to rent their property after offering it for rental at the same levels, then the tenant can be sued for the remaining time on the lease. I am available at any time for either the town or the town attorneys to discuss how this law is not preempted and why it's entirely appropriate for the Village of New Paltz to enact such a law. Some of the people who spoke in favor of the law have already mentioned most of the reasons why I think this would be good, why this would be very good policy. I agree with those, but I will not, in the interest of time and appreciate the time that you've given me, I will not reiterate those points. But again, offer whatever legal expertise I can in assuring the village that what you are doing is entirely legally appropriate. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judith. And then next we have in person, Tony Saracino.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Saracino, and I live in the Village of New Paltz. I own 4 properties in it. I'm tied to this village emotionally, intellectually, and financially, which is more than I can say than anybody who is for this legislation and has anything to do with this village. I'm present in this village every day. I'm the chairperson of the zoning board. I've been on it for over 5 years. Every month, I protect the aesthetics of this village faithfully and thoughtfully. I work a full-time job and I do manage properties. Yet I meet with the building inspector on average twice a month. The mayor has seen me there on several occasions. I drive out to inspect every property I vote on. I do this because I love the village I live in and I want to contribute to maintaining the integrity of it. Tell me, Did I not warn at least someone sitting down with me and soliciting my opinion before you propose this legislation? Maybe not, I don't know. But I certainly warranted as much as the college students you spoke with and the gentlemen that you bring in here who live not even within 50 miles of this village and come here and have opinions about it. I definitely want somebody speaking to me. I feel that this board has forgotten that landlords assume all the risks of a property. We are the ones who are sued when a student overloads an outlet with a refrigerator in their bedroom, a heater which they shouldn't have, a computer, a printer, and an amplifier all tied to it. If they cause a fire, we're the ones who are sued. If they fall down and trip over a brick, we're the ones that are sued. That carries a risk. But again, even with that risk, I feel like I'm painted as some kind of greedy carpetbagger when in essence, all I do every day is protect the tenants, their homes, and the village I live in. Yet again, I'm not brought into any of this. I have to come here now and defend myself against the phony caricature of a greedy landlord that simply doesn't exist in New Paltz. As I look at this proposed legislation, I've read it thoroughly, and I really feel it's not about security deposits or landlords knocking on the door and walking into a dwelling. This is about rent control and lease renewal, losing control of that. Let's take a look at rent control. I don't understand the call for this. Like lease renewal, I have seen no data to support a need for intensified rent control. We already have a law outlining what rent control is on our books. What data is the village bringing to me to show that there's a need to add or change that law? You have a chart showing an increase in median rents that go beyond the current inflationary rent. So far, I've seen not one piece of data showing anything, and I've requested. I will share with you exactly what I see.
Oh, 1 minute warning.
We built Water Street, we built Water Street Market.
It's been 3 minutes on the.
We built the Black Box Theater. We put up office buildings. And when I walk down Main Street, I get 3 different types of chocolate, a gourmet cheesecake, and see every outdoor cafe. But if I have to drive 15 miles to get a pair of sneakers, if this does not scream gentrification, what does? Yet from all this, what do we get? We get the image of the greedy landlord throwing people out of their homes so they can collect massive Airbnb windfalls. Of course, I've seen no data to support any of this, nor have I seen any of this occur anywhere in our village, which I'm here every day. Here's the beauty. I've not raised my rents one dime since 2015, and this is completely documented. Taxes have gone up, utilities have gone up, maintenance and repairs have gone up, yet I've not raised my rents a penny. Even the village has gotten in on this. We all pay more per the unit on these rentals to the village now, right? So the village has made sure they've gotten in on this and they've gotten paid. Yet the landlord is the greedy one here. In my opinion, you're using the landlord as the blast shield against the gentrification that has occurred in this town that the village has been complicit with every step of the way. The real way to solve the so-called problem, again, there's no data, is to create more housing. That is what drives rents. It's supply and demand. The way I view my landlords is my competition. They play a role. And one of the many factors as to why I'm motivated to keeping my properties in good shape and rent competitive. That is always the best way to prevent unfair rents, in my opinion. Lastly, lease renewal. Again, where is the issue here? Why is the village feeling compelled to get involved in a lease negotiation without any data outlining what the need is for you to be involved? Generally, isn't a new law passed when a need arises for it? Why is the village attempting to deny my right as a landlord to negotiate and mutually agree upon a contract with a binding termination date, or if so chosen, at least a binding renewal clause by myself and a prospective tenant?
Could you start to wrap up, please?
Tell me, I'm almost done. I got about 30 seconds. Tell me
Thank
again,
you.
at the time of a lease signing, why someone cannot ask me for a 3-year lease and we negotiate that? Or why we cannot negotiate a renewal clause at the time a lease is signed? Why can't this be done via a free market? Have you really thought this through? I rent my homes as a single entity, $2,800 for the home. On December 27th, I knock on the door. I ask who wants to stay. 1 kid wants to stay, 3 are graduating. So now I have 1 kid who has to come up with $2,800. Now he then says he has 3 more people, and I say no to all 3 of them. What does he do now? What's next? Another lawyer telling me I have to rent to who the tenant tells me to rent to? Let's get this straight. Who is going to make those decisions? I guess as an owner of the property, that's all I am. Eventually, the village will be dragged into litigation at some point, some way here. It's inevitable. The irony here is since I live in this village, I'm actually paying for the village to deny me this very basic and I believe fundamental right that I'll be paying for the village attorney to protect this law while eventually paying my own attorney to get this right granted back to me. Basically, I'm paying for a guy to get back my rights from another guy I already paid to deny me.
All right, so that's been a good 6 minutes. Thanks so much. So Victoria Morel is next up on the virtual. No, you're done. 6 minutes is more than enough time.
Without good, hard empirical data, I do not know why this law should even consider involving
You can
itself
submit
as a third party. Show me the data, show me the families that are out on the street.
You could send the whole statement to assistant at villageofnewpaltz.org.
Excuse me, may I speak? I have been waiting patiently.
Okay, next up, Victoria. Thank you. Can everyone chill? Stop spreading the.
Thank you.
Everyone listen, I want to say something. We have 3 minutes to talk. Okay, we have to be fair. It was unfair to Tony that people were interrupting him. I want to hear him. I want to hear from all of you. Want to see like someone talk? Listen, you have to let I'm sorry. That's it.
I sent everyone an email who wrote to me, 3 minutes is the rule.
And I've been
sorry
letting
that we were
everyone
not-
go
We were
over.
dealing with a lot of technology things. I was supposed to be the timekeeper and I was dealing with the technology and the sound. So I
You're doing
put it on them
sorry.
to
Thank
deal
you.
with the time. So, yes.
All
Yes.
right, so,
Yeah.
okay,
This is
Michelle.
something that's been an issue ongoing, and I appreciate that you're here, and we really want to hear you guys, but 3 minutes is the rule, all right? That's it.
Okay, Victoria.
Maybe you can cut out anything you've heard
Okay,
already.
everyone please order. I'm sharing, so chill. Victoria, go on.
Okay, I'm going to first start speaking, and I hope that people can hear me, okay?
Vic, we can't hear you because
Excuse
everyone's
me.
making a lot of noise. Calm down, everyone. Okay, now Vic, go on.
Excuse me, I've been waiting to
Go.
speak patiently. Thank you so
Let's
much.
go.
So my name is Victoria Morel. I have been a renter in the village of New Paltz off and on since about 2011. I've rented apartments both as an undergraduate student and then later on in my life when I was a working professional, working up in Dutchess County and living in the village of New Paltz. And as a tenant, I have experienced both crummy landlords and some really wonderful landlords. But I am not here to discuss my past landlords because I don't think that this needs to be a debate that is landlord versus tenant. I'm here to shed some light on what good cause eviction actually is and why I think it's necessary. In the interest of time, I did prepare a lot about the law itself, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over some of that because I think that we've heard enough about that, and I'm just going to kind of speak off the cuff a little bit here. So I just want to address a couple of different things. So first of all, what I think is really great about this law is that it prevents landlords from using unconscionable rent increases as a means of de facto eviction. I've heard a number of past landlords here talk about that they do raise rent. And to me, that's alarming when you consider that we are dealing with village residents who's living in apartments and they're not actually getting paid anymore. So I think that de facto eviction, that using a rent increase as a de facto eviction, I'm glad that this law exists and would protect that. Also, this law would give tenants the right to renew their leases. I believe that renewal leases benefit everyone. And I think that that is particularly true in a village such as this, where many apartments become vacant at the close of each college semester. You know, renewal leases will lessen this phenomenon and it will help create a more permanent sense of community. So it doesn't just benefit landlords and tenants, but the community as a whole. I will point out that the right to a renewal lease is a not so new concept. Rent stabilized tenants in New York City have enjoyed that right for many years, as do tenants in numerous other municipalities. Courts have held that it doesn't interfere with the landlord's right to control their property. And despite what some community members may believe, it is not unconstitutional. Okay, thank you. I also think that good cause eviction laws, such as the one proposed here, will promote safe and healthy housing. Now, the state of New York has some of the oldest housing stock in the entire country, and with age comes problems. And as a result, the state is plagued with a phenomenon of retaliatory evictions, where tenants are forced to live in dangerous conditions. And when they ask their landlords to repair those conditions, they eventually will face a wrongful eviction. And in subsequent court proceedings, the burden to show that they were wrongfully evicted falls on the tenant. This law has built into it a clause where a landlord who has an unresolved housing code violation or an unresolved housing hazardous condition case cannot evict their tenants. And that's a good thing. And I also think that coming off of the year we all just experienced, healthy and safe housing should be our #1 priority. And this is crucial that this is built in here. This law also protects landlords. It provides clear guidelines that lays out in clear language exactly when a landlord may be able to remove a tenant. So it takes the guesswork out of property management. And those of you who have 4,500 tenants over the years should really appreciate that it takes the guesswork out of it for you. And now I know what you're all going to say. Does she even live here? And the truth is, at this moment, I do not. I left New Paltz 3 years ago in order to attend law school in New York City. That was a choice driven solely by the fact that New Paltz does not have a law school of its own. Now, my partner and I always planned on returning to the village because we both lived there for many years and consider it home. However, at this moment, I cannot afford to return to the village. The other day, I saw a 2-bedroom apartment advertised. No, the other day, I saw a 2-bedroom apartment advertised for $300 more than the 2-bedroom apartment I currently live in New York City. And gentrification will come for all of you eventually. First, it drives out renters such as myself, but soon it will drive out property owners too. If you think your property taxes are too high now, just wait to see what will happen at the end of this housing boom. That's all I have to say. I apologize for going over time. I do not mean to be disrespectful
Sorry,
to
everyone
the
started
community.
interrupting you.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Minute alarm. John Johnson's next.
That's
That's what that alarm has been. It's been going off the whole time.
That alarm is around.
John Johnson, go for it.
Did you raise your hand when I have 1 minute left?
Sure. Yeah.
3 minutes. Hi, my name's John Johnson. I think most of you know me. I came here in my 20s with my wife. We bought a condemned, broken down house that was condemned for 10 years and boarded up on North Chestnut Street. My wife and I worked and renovated the place and rented it out. We bought another place, another broken down place, fixed it up and rented it. We love this town, my wife and I. I can guarantee you, as much as you do, and I know how much you do, and I bet you more than anyone else in this place. I actually can't say that. My wife told me not to, she told me to stick to my Not one person did I hear that today that was forced out of their house. I have a rental property with a single parent and 2 kids that I haven't raised a rent in 15 years. 15 years. My policy is if you want to stay, I don't raise the rent. That's my policy. The reason being is if they're good tenants, I want them to stay. I don't want that work to, they move out, I got to repaint the whole place, I have to clean the place, I have to fix the place. It costs a lot of money to do that. As school taxes go up 4% a year, town taxes have gone up as much as 9%. Well, okay. Here's the gist of my story. I've owned rental property in New Falls for over 25 years. Thankfully, I've had a positive relationship with the majority of my tenants. And this is important because in a small community like this one, when you rent to someone, you're inviting them into your life. When you rent to someone, you're basically living with that person. You have a relationship that goes back and forth, sometimes good, sometimes bad. We've had situations where my wife has been fearful to go to the property because someone was so rude. And that, thank God, that's only happened once. But you know what? It was the light at the end of the tunnel. We said, you know what? We could try to evict them, but we have 2 months. Let's try to keep everything calm and not stir the pot and let them go peacefully. Now, please don't straddle me with someone that's straddles. My wife says, it's not straddle, it's saddle.
We got what you meant though.
Don't straddle me with someone that is, I don't know what to call them, but pain in the ass.
Thank you.
And once again, where has been, one person has stood up here and said they've been evicted wrongly. Not
All right,
one
so that was a
person.
solid 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
J.W. Mason. I know, that was pretty good. J.W. Mason is a virtual person.
Hi, my name is J.W. Mason. I'm a professor of economics at John Jay College at the City University of New York. I'm a New Yorker, but I'm speaking here as an economist. And as an economist, I just want to share sort of 3 general things that we know about bills like this. The first thing we know is that they are effective at reducing evictions statistically. The second thing we know is that that's not a small benefit because evictions are extremely costly, both for the individuals involved and for society. And third, we have good reason to think that they don't have the negative economic effects that some people believe. So on the first point, we don't have a lot of evidence, but we have some evidence because we do have, particularly in California, similar laws that have been passed for long enough that we can now look at the effects. And the best recent study of this is by Julieta Cuellar from a couple of years ago. And she finds that the effect of these laws is to reduce the rate of evictions and eviction filings in the cities that have passed them by about 0.8 of a percentage point compared with comparable cities elsewhere. That may sound like a small number, but given the relatively low rate of evictions, it's actually a very large number. Of course,
the stenographer wants you to slow down a little bit, and this interruption will.
I'll submit this in writing afterwards as well, with the references. But we know that, as I said, in California, the effect seems to be to reduce eviction filings by about 0.8 of a percentage point, which means reducing the actual rate of evictions by somewhere on the order of a third to a half. In other words, it's a very substantially lower rate of eviction filings in towns, in communities that have passed these laws compared with comparable ones that do not have similar laws. So in general, we have pretty good evidence that these laws are effective at their intended purpose, which is to reduce the rate of evictions. The second thing we know, we have a lot of good evidence, is that evictions are very costly. They have major long-term costs. A lot of work by Matthew Desmond and Rachel Kimbrough and other folks who find that the effects of being evicted on someone are both very severe in the moment, but actually can extend for years afterwards. So in one paper they find, I quote from the paper, for 2 mothers who are otherwise similar, but only one experiences an eviction, the mother who is evicted is more than twice as likely to report that her child is in poor health, is more likely to report parental stress, is more likely to report depression, and is more likely to report various measures of material hardship. And these impacts continue for years after the eviction. So there's a real long-term impact on people's life chances and material circumstances on the basis of being evicted. And that means that even preventing a relatively small number of evictions can have a major social benefit. More recently, we've also got some evidence that evictions have an important relationship with community transmission of COVID. There was a recent study by Lifehite just this past summer, which found that eviction moratoria were associated with, the expiration of eviction moratoria. In other words, resuming evictions were associated with a doubling of COVID-19 community transmission, as well as a significant positive impact on mortality from COVID-19. In fact, the finding here is that in places where eviction moratoria were removed, COVID mortality rates increased by 5. So in the context of an ongoing pandemic, it seems like there's a really substantial impact from even reducing eviction rates by a relatively modest amount, which bills like this do seem to do. The final point I'll just make very briefly, in terms of the impact on things like investment in housing, we don't have a lot of evidence of these bills, but there is a lot of study of rent control. And it turns out the effects of rent control and rent regulation on housing investment that people sort of believe are very hard to find in the data. There's a really strong evidence that there's not a significant reduction in housing investment, which makes sense because bills like this, whether good cause eviction or rent regulation, do not prevent landlords from charging whatever rent they choose to new tenants, and they don't prevent them from benefiting from housing investment, either improvement of existing properties or construction of new properties. The only thing they prevent people from doing is reaping a windfall gain when the value of the property.
Okay, can you wrap it up?
Yes, so I'll end there. That's sufficient. I'll submit the rest in writing.
Thank you. And then, great. So next we had Anthony, Perzia. Okay, cool.
Oh, hi, I'm unlike everyone who spoke in favor of this. My family's been in the Hudson Valley for over 150 years. I've had not as many tenants as Leonard, but I've had hundreds over the last 24 years of being a landlord. And the one thing I want everyone to remember here, my father's a landlord in Highland. He actually physically saw one of his tenants abusing the wife and the child. If this law goes into effect, because that wife did not want to press charges, that person would still be in his house abusing that wife and that child. And I can't impress upon you enough of how much we all care about what our neighbors think. If we have a tenant that is abusive, if we have a tenant that's loud, that's obnoxious, or doing something dangerous, we take that responsibility to heart. Removing that person, if they have not physically been convicted of a crime, with this law, the way it's being proposed, would be virtually impossible. Everyone here that's a landlord, we're doing this not because we want to make more money. We all charge virtually the same rent because we're all in competition. If one of us charged a windfall, like the person who just spoke, they would never have a tenant. We all have to be competitive. Our rents are very, very affordable. I have not raised my rents in over 9 years in all of my tenants. Not 9 years I've not raised my rents. I've never evicted a single person. I've only kept a security deposit once in all those hundreds and hundreds of people. I really believe that everyone who's speaking for this, they're talking about an environment, some economy that doesn't exist here in New Paltz. We have people here that actually care. We care about students, we care about families, and what we are doing is what's the best for the environment, for the environment overall. The economy itself is prospering because of what we do. And I really, I want you to just close your eyes. Beat my dad for 5 minutes. When he sees that guy beating on his wife and his child, remember that they were not convicted. He had to be evicted. The sheriffs had to come and remove him because the wife would not press charges. The rest of the tenants in that house had to see this every day. Their children had to see this man beating on his wife and beating on his child. If this law goes into effect the way it's written, they would still have to be doing that. And I apologize, I have to leave right now because my daughter is being babysat and I only had an hour and a half and I'm already past that. But I really can't impress upon you enough how damaging that was for me. And I hope that my daughter never sees that. And I know that my father's tenants saw that. So please think about that before you vote on this law. And I'm a citizen here. I'm a resident here for 150 years. My family's been here. Unlike everyone on this Zoom call who didn't take the time to come down here, put a mask on, and do it in person.
All right. So next up we have Liz Elkin. Liz. Oh, I said Liz Elkin. You have to be heard on the mic.
You can email it to me. It's
Are you gonna read from it?
Yeah.
Could you give me a copy of it? Yeah. And then I would like, anybody who read the comments, please give me a copy.
Yeah. And email me a copy.
Thank you.
The proposed good cause eviction law is deeply flawed. The law's justification uses political talking points and does not offer any supporting evidence. This law claims many tenants are being evicted for unjustifiable reasons. Under existing state law, evictions must go through our judicial system, and owners are required to show good cause in a court of law. So how can eviction occur for unjustifiable reasons. The proposal also contains no evidence for the claim that many landlords fail to comply with the village rental registry law, or that there are de facto evictions via non-renewal, so owners can rent to higher income tenants. Are these evidence-based statements? I would like to hear facts that support these vague claims. A lease is an agreement between a landlord and a tenant, which both parties knowingly agree to when they sign. The rental amount and the length of time are the two essential terms. New York law supports this principle, and both parties benefit from a clear definition of rent and the time period. The proposed new law changes this relationship since it makes any lease a potential one-sided lifetime contract. Both parties should individually have the right to decide whether they want to renew that contract, rather than forcing landlords to enter into lifetime contracts with no way out. New York State already has some of the strongest tenant protections in the country. I understand that there's some property owners who do not act in good faith, but if we want to be honest, there are also some tenants who actively manipulate the system to their own advantage. There are times when non-renewal is an important tool for landlords to part ways with a difficult tenant in a peaceful way. Calling a non-renewal of a lease a de facto eviction is wrong and casts a negative partisan light on a peaceful legal end of contract and a parting of ways. It's not right that a tenant can enter into a lease for a year and then stay there for the rest of their lives if this law were to pass. Over the years, I've supported and celebrated many of the progressive legislative actions the village has enacted. I cannot support this law as it has little merit and lacks reason and wrongly gives tenants outweighed rights over other people's private property. Before enacting this one-sided law, let's slow down and hear from both sides. Hopefully we can find real solutions to real problems. I suggest that there should be a study by the village with both tenants and landlords participating to assess what actually makes sense and respects the rights of all people who are involved in these dynamic relationships.
Thank you. And then next is Matt Elkin.
Double Elkin dose. I have so much personal commentary and disappointed feelings that I would like to share, but I'm actually speaking on behalf of the New Paltz Property Owners Association, which many of them are here this evening, as you know. So the New Paltz Property Owners Association has been meeting to discuss this proposed good cause eviction law. We have many specific concerns about particular aspects of the law, but the purpose of this statement is to discuss more broad-based concerns regarding whether the law is needed in New Paltz at all. The justification of the proposed law, which we've heard about actually several times, states, today many residential tenants in the village of New Paltz are being evicted for unjustifiable reasons. Sounds compelling, but is it actually true? We tried to find out by asking village officials for statistics on the evictions in the village, and they had none. Until the very basis of this proposed law can be substantiated with actual data, passage of the law should not be considered. And in the very least, 3 hearings is sounding to be very little for all of this hoopla, and none of us even want to be here. That I just added, sorry. With no data from the village, we tried to gather some of our own. And we heard some from Mohammed earlier, but I have some updated figures on that. We took a survey of property owners who manage 241 units. So if you're going to start listening anytime, this is a good time. 241 units with a total of 703 bedrooms in the village of New Paltz. We asked how many tenants have been evicted in the past 5 years and found that most of the landlords had never evicted a single tenant. The total number of evictions found in the survey over a 5-year period was just 5. That is equivalent to 1 eviction per 700 bedrooms per year. Sounds hardly like an eviction crisis. We went further asking how many tenants had been non-renewed when a tenant wished to stay over the past 5 years. The total number was 16, 10 from 1 landlord, equivalent to 3 non-renewals per year for 700 bedrooms, 1/2 of 1%. Nearly all of these were for causes that would still be allowed in the law. Damage to the property, nuisance to the neighbors, and non-payment of rent. 2 were a result of late notice to the landlord that the tenant wanted to renew. None were a result of rent hikes. In short, the proposed law appears to be a solution in search of a problem. It's not a homegrown initiative in response to a local crisis. Rather, it's an effort by groups outside of our community trying to further their efforts to impose rent control, a law repeatedly rejected in the New York State Legislature. Perhaps the proponents of this law should focus their efforts on towns and cities where eviction and non-renewal is an actual problem. Albany, for example, had 4,120 eviction proceedings in 2019 alone. Passage of some kind of a good cause eviction law may actually make sense in that environment, but not here in New Paltz, where evictions are extremely rare. Back to the questions of the few tenants who are not being renewed by landlords. Who are these tenants? Landlords definitely would prefer to renew tenants. We've heard that tonight, that are reasonable and paying their rent over having a vacancy. A vacancy is to be avoided. It costs money. We've heard all of this. True, landlords do not want to retain tenants who aren't paying rent or are causing a nuisance. The answer is primarily tenants that don't take care of their rental or act irresponsibly towards others involved with the property. The proposed law does not seem to acknowledge the existence of such tenants, but they do indeed exist. The law seems specifically designed to protect a handful of negligent tenants. The cause of a tenant's multiple non-renewals may be the result of their actions rather than their landlords. While we have been wanting to avoid personal attacks in this policy discussion, we believe it's relevant that the lead advocate of the law, Deputy Mayor, has been non-renewed 12 times in the village of New Paltz by her own count. Are we really willing to add a new layer of costly and cumbersome judicial oversight along with new administrative requirements and regulated rents to protect the very few problematic renters that landlords don't want to renew?
So yeah, please fix your mask. And that was a pretty solid 5 minutes. So could you just wrap it up, please?
Sure. Fortunately, there are market forces at work. There's a 600-bedroom project currently being reviewed to the south of campus, along with about 200 rental units in various stages of planning and construction along North Chestnut as a result of the rezoning of the district. This new supply will hopefully help to gently bring down rents and give more choice to these tenants, allowing them to avoid the bad landlords by giving them alternative places to live. We should allow the supply to come online and observe what benefits it has to tenants, rather than push a cumbersome adversarial law that will help virtually no one.
All right, next up we have Ariel Short.
Thank you.
How's it going? So my name is Ariel Schwartz. I'm a tenant, 38 Prospect. I've been a resident of the village for 4 years, not from the city. Okay, not part of any political organization, not some far left academic progressive with a stick up their ass, okay? That's not me, all right? I'm a proud American who values common sense, and I think that this law is a law rooted in common sense, and it has my full unequivocal support. Okay, now I don't think that any of you are manipulative. I don't think that any of you are liars. I don't think that any of you are telling anything but the truth. Now, I also respect the fact that we have people who have got deep ties to the community, whose families have been here for over a century, right? Thing is, you know, this town is getting more and more influence from the city every year, every day. We're getting more people from the city. We're getting more development from the city. That's going to be more landlords from the city, and that's going to be more manipulative landlords, not you, the newer landlords. So it might not be a problem right now. It will be a problem in the future. I think for the long-term health of the village, we need to pass this. Or we need to make sure that we don't have other landlords undermining your good names, okay? And actually, actually making this a problem, okay? You know, prevention is important. Long-term thinking is important. Long-term planning is important, and this is part of that. This is long-term planning. All right. I know plenty of other tenants who have got the same concerns. They are not here tonight. So many of them are working right now. Many of them are scared that many of them don't know their landlords too well, and are afraid that their landlords might retaliate against them. And I think those are unfounded fears, which is why I'm here. All right. I work a minimum wage job. I work at a group home for disabled men. We got plenty of renters throughout the town, hundreds, probably a couple thousand village residents who work minimum wage jobs. We got to make sure that we don't get taken advantage of by other landlords in the future. So that's why I'm in support of this, and I appreciate it, and I hope it passes. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Robin Ranga.
I'm sorry. Those were good. What was the name?
Robin Ranga, R-A-N-G-A. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I'll keep it brief because I know we all want to get home. My name is Robin Ranga, and I'm the political coordinator with Nobody Leaves New Hudson. Before I begin, I just want to take a moment to appreciate how many people we have out here to speak on this issue and the spirited debate that we've had. I think that speaks to the magnitude of the housing crisis in the village of New Paltz and across the Hudson Valley. Our organization was founded to fight housing injustice in these communities. Every day, we fight with people who face the constant struggle and fear of housing insecurity. And we have spoken to hundreds of residents of the village of New Paltz, and they have expressed the dire need for good cause eviction legislation in this community.
Where are they?
Yeah,
Please don't interrupt speakers. Continue.
Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. The people who face housing insecurity, the renters who are facing jacked up rent or the risk of eviction, many of them are not at this meeting because they can't afford to be. They're working a second job, or they're caring for their families, or they're a minority or undocumented and don't feel comfortable at government meetings. Too often, these renters are invisible to government and they're invisible to the rest of society, but they refuse to be silent any longer. We have a petition that has over 280 signatures in support of good cause, which is far more than the number of people in this room right now. And so the idea that it's outside agitators pushing for this legislation is absolutely incorrect. We did have policy experts on to speak on the policy merits of this legislation, but it's residents who've been pushing for it as well. This is a policy that the most marginalized members of this community have been demanding for years. Oh God, my mask. I'm sorry about that. Okay. And you're right. I'm not a resident. I'm from Poughkeepsie. But activists such as myself represent the people that cannot be here themselves. And according to the information, according to the data that we have, according to information from the U.S. Census Bureau, of the 71% of people in the village of New Paltz that are renters, 62% are rent burdened, which means that they spend more than a third of their income on rent, which goes to show that some policy change is necessary. And to all of the good and decent landlords out there who are worried about the implications of this law, I understand your concern. I understand this is your livelihood and you want to protect it. I get that you might be worried. This bill is specifically designed not to harm you. There are mechanisms in the law that give the judge discretion around rent increases and just eviction, and provisions that allow landlords to reclaim the property for personal use. I'll close with this. Every time that we expanded rights in this country, it's made people feel uncomfortable. 60 years ago, when we fought for the Civil Rights Act, people were made uncomfortable. The government mandated that business owners had to serve people of color, and that made them uncomfortable. It mandated that they could not deny them services without a just cause. And I'm sure at the time, many well-meaning business owners opposed it, and it made them worried about their livelihoods. And they decried outside activists and agitators pushing for it. But because eventually good people rose up above fear and push through discomfort and extended empathy to those that are different than themselves, we affirmed universal rights and built stronger communities. And the village of New Paltz has the opportunity to make history and do so once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Theresa Thompson.
Oh, go ahead, I'm following. Okay, first of all, to you, I'm not sure if you got my email, but I think nobody needs this, it has to do great things. And I participated in them, and I've donated heavily to them, and I've worked with them, and I will not be donating or working with them ever again. What you said was awful, and the analogies you put forth in your statement were horrible. So that's just to you. Yes, I am. I'm very sorry for you too. So I'm going to read the letter that I wrote to the New Paltz Times this week. What? To the New Paltz Times. Actually, you're welcome. My name is Theresa Thompson. I've lived in the New Paltz community for 30 years, attending SUNY New Paltz, owning a small business, raising a family, and contributing to and supporting schools, activities, and residents. I've always considered New Paltz to be a friendly village where problems are solved by collaboration between residents, local government, and supporting entities. This is not true of the proposed good cause eviction law written and presented by the deputy mayor. The deputy mayor has been a divisive force between landlords and tenants in our community for several years. Instead of bringing the two groups together in harmony, she only strives to create turmoil and animosity among them. This is not the New Paltz I know. The deputy mayor has been a tenant in the village for New Paltz for many years, and during her tenure, her lease has been non-renewed a total of 12 times. Karen, did you get that 12 times? Okay, great, because I just want to make sure. I am sure one can justify having an unsatisfactory landlord once or twice or 3 times, but 12 times? That doesn't sound like a landlord problem. It sounds like a tenant problem, a bad tenant problem. How can someone govern effectively or participate in economic development with this very large continual blemish on their record? Regardless of the deputy mayor's vast issues in her own personal housing situations, the good cause eviction law is ill-timed and unnecessary. When asked for information on the number of evictions in New Paltz within the past 5 years and other pertinent information which would be necessary to create this law, the deputy mayor's responses have been, quote, "I'll have to circle back to you on that," or quote, "I don't know." How does an elected official create legislation without vital data such as this? It's absolutely criminal to even think of proposing a law without clear and concise fact gathering, including acquiring information from both sides of the equation, tenants and landlords. A survey was sent out to the tenant group while the landlord group received no information, survey, questionnaire, or any other form of inquiry. I personally have been here a long time. I would like to see a congenial and productive relationship between both the tenant and landlord groups in our community, one that is fruitful for all.
1-minute warning.
Of course, you want me to stop. The constant animosity that the deputy mayor creates is egregious and unbecoming of an elected official, any elected official. Please do better. And I just want you to know, are you going to listen to the people that don't live here or the people that are here that elected you to your seats? Who are you going to listen to? These paid people from the city that know nothing about New Paltz, or the people that your kids go to school with and you live with? It's a no-brainer.
I'm not paid and I'm here just because I want to come back to New Paltz.
All right.
Who was that?
That was Victoria Morel.
Okay.
So next up we have Ed Burke. Hey, Ed.
Hey, Ed.
Wow, I'm all over the place on this. There was a justification to the start of the law, or the introduction to the law that talked about how bad landlords are. So I kind of just changed it around. Today, many residential tenants in the village of New Paltz fail to fulfill the obligation of their contractual leases for unjustifiable reasons. Further, most landlords comply with every part of the village of New Paltz rental registry law, as well as fulfill every aspect of their leases following state, local, and federal laws. Politicians across our state and advocates in our village are looking to take control over how property owners conduct their business with their private property in order to institute rent controls across the state and here in the village. This is just another grab for power from a group of politically motivated individuals. And since New York State already has some of the most favorable laws in the country for tenant rights, one might ask why this legislation. After listening to 6 advocates, the village of New Paltz is being a surrogate for this law. The problem does not exist here.
Right.
Sam Stein, what he talked about is already on the books in New York State. Tim, incredible. That's where the surrogate came from. New Paltz, be your progressive self like you did in the past. Judith talked about Albany, the law in Albany. And again, there was 97,000 people who live in Albany, 4,200 evictions. I would like for one person to tell me how many evictions happened in New Paltz. You don't know that. J.W. Mason, economics, talked about the eviction costs, it being expensive. Again, how many evictions do we have in New Paltz? I was on the landlord tenant council for the last 4 years. I've owned property in the village for 29 years. I've had hundreds of tenants, and I've never, not once, renewed a lease. Never once, and I think that's a constant theme. I know a lot of what transpires for the last 4 years, listening to the tenants, listening to the landlords, and resolving the issues. And especially over the last year and a half, I created a Facebook page for the Landlord Tenant Council, and we listened to a lot of the complaints. I reached out to every single tenant and tried to help them resolve the issues. This is not just a landlord issue. This is absolutely a landlord and a tenant issue. We have a rental registry law on the books. One would think that the village did a better job of enforcing the current registration, inspection, and compliance part of the law currently on the books. Maybe some of the issues that have come to light could be resolved without new legislation. Again, this is an education and a communication issue, not a legislative issue. So anybody wants to ask me or talk to me about what I saw over the last 4 years, from a tenant response, from a landlord response, I'd be more than happy to talk. To Tony's point, being on the Landlord Tenant Council for the last 4 years and not having somebody ask me my input as to what I thought about the law, I think is just irresponsible. So, lastly, Bravo, sorry, 62% are rent burden in the village of New Paltz. 59% of the people who live in the village are 18 to 24. The very transient community. They come, they go. That's the nature of the dynamics. So just because you say 62% are rent burden, you have to look at what the population is going to get.
Great. So next we have Matt Eiler. Who? Oh, that was Ed Burke. Yeah, next we have Matt Eiler. Hi.
How you doing?
It's 9 o'clock on the dot.
Okay, it's Matt Eiler, E-Y-L-E-R. I'm an active community member. I'm a real estate professional. I'm a small landlord. I have one property I manage and one that I own. I've been here for 18 years. And I'm involved in a lot of stuff in this community. So this whole thing is making me a little sad that it's, creating this image that there's this animosity when I really think mostly there's not. But anyway, I want to focus on the unintended negative consequences, not on the law for not the landlords, but for the actual tenants, the people this is meant to help. Tim Rogers was nice enough to meet with me early in the week. He expressed an open-mindedness to modify the law to make it better for everyone. In that spirit, I want to focus on one particular aspect of the law that will have profound negative consequences on housing affordability in the village of New Paltz. We've all talked about this 5% cap that's suggested in the law, and that's what I want to talk about. While this may seem reasonable on the face of things, I don't believe the authors of this proposed law have really thought through the natural reactions landlords will have to restricting their ability to charge market rent. Let me just walk it through like my response, how I'm going to react to it to make it concrete for y'all. I have 4 residential tenants in the building I own on Church Street. I have not raised their rent for any of them since I bought the building 6 years ago. The rents they pay are far below market rent, but because of a nice cooperative relationship, I have let it slide. With this new 5% increase, I feel my hand is kind of forced. I plan to raise their rents somewhat before this law is even enacted in order to protect my investment. So the mere introduction of this law is causing housing to become less affordable for my tenants in the village of New Paltz. Similarly, in a separate building that I manage, which has 8 units, 8 bedrooms, I rarely raise rents. If a tenant's rent falls way behind market, I may increase it by like $100 every 5 years. Due to the 5% annual limit, though, this is no longer an option. My hand is being forced again. So now, like several other people here, I'm gonna have to raise it each year instead of letting people, just my good tenants, slide. Just to keep pace with market rent. All the other landlords I've spoken plan to do the same thing. So the cost of renting an apartment in the village will actually increase faster than it otherwise would have if this law is passed. Next, and this one no one's touched on yet.
Just like 1 minute warning.
Okay, think about how landlords will approach leasing vacant units to new tenants under this new law. Since the law makes it impossible to non-renew simply because a tenant is unreasonable, irresponsible, or unable to pay market rent, I plan to view each new potential tenant with far more scrutiny than I have in the past. I will not rent to tenants with borderline credit. I will be much more diligent in talking to former landlords and acquaintances. Any hint that a potential tenant might be difficult to deal with, and I'll wait to find a better one. Other landlords are saying the same thing. So the housing situation will become more restrictive for the very tenants you're trying to protect here. For all these reasons, I think it's important, critical, in the critical interest of tenants, that at the very least remove that 5% rent cap, anything about rent cap from the law. And can I read one more paragraph and be done?
Sure, just do.
Okay. In closing, I just want to say that I have a nice relationship with my tenants. I get along with all of them, and I try to work with them in good faith. I think this proposed law creates an unnecessarily adversarial framework involving official notices and orders from a judge rather than simple human communication. Under the current system, landlords are incentivized to be good landlords to avoid the cost and inconvenience of vacancy, and tenants are incentivized to be good tenants in order to get renewed. This law undermines that healthy dynamic, which the vast majority of landlords and tenants in our village enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. So then I have one more in-person comment and then a list of 11 that we have to read out loud that were submitted. So Adele Ruger.
You'll be happy to know mine, sure.
Thank you. My timer's back.
My name is Adele Ruger. I have a couple of points I'd like to make. Maybe they weren't brought up before. First, as the board knows, I had a tenant just this year who created horrible violations which made living in the building untenable for the other tenants. These violations were not only his, but mine by default as a property owner. There was nothing I could do. It took 14 months to get this tenant out, all the while in violation. What this proposed law says is that while there is a violation, a landlord cannot file for eviction in any of their other rental properties. This makes no sense. Sometimes the tenant can create a violation. In addition, during this period of tenant-created violation, the landlord shall not be able to collect rent. Again, this makes no sense. My second issue is with the tone of this law. I've lived in the village of New Paltz for almost 50 years. I put 6 kids through New Paltz schools, own a business, and volunteer in various capacities that take up about 30 hours of my time each week. Most landlords here are local business owners, restaurant owners, social workers, teachers, electricians, realtors. We volunteer on school boards, planning and zoning boards, the PTA, the Rotary, community foundations.
We deliver groceries to seniors, we help fundraise for large projects, and we coach and sponsor local sports. In reading the justification for the law, I became angry. You portray landlords as evil, money-grubbing monsters. How dare you? You all thought this was appropriate. Hard to believe. People with no ties to the community, who don't know us, who are paid, come here and drum up problems that really don't exist. There are some bad tenants. Waiting until the lease ends is a good way to end that relationship. Now we will have to go to court. It will be expensive and tie up a property for months, not allowing a new tenant to move in. Rents will go up because of this. The state has not passed this law, and neither should New Paltz.
Thank you. Okay, so that was it that I had on the list here. So a comment written. Yeah, sure.
Turn the sheet over.
It's not, is there another sheet?
No, I got this one here.
Oh, well, so they need to be shared with the person sharing the meeting, if that's cool. But yeah, Maggie, if you want to hop up in the meantime.
What's her name, Maggie?
Yeah, but if there's another sheet that, you know, someone's using, then.
I don't know.
Thanks, Maggie.
I'm Maggie Becker from New Paltz. I have lived in VEVE, Victor Eric.
My name's right on
I've
the
lived
sheet.
in.
It's not on my
We
sheet.
don't have that one, so if you could pass it over, that'd be great.
You tell
Thank
me
you.
when the clock is starting. Okay. I've lived in New Paltz for 43 years. I've raised my 3 children. I have taken care of my mother 8 years in my home. I have taken care of my father 5 or 6 years in my home. And I was able to do that in New Paltz because I'm a small mom and pop landlord. I have 2 to 3 rentals in the 43 years. In those 43 years, I have to echo the voices of those who have said they really haven't needed to do evictions. They really haven't had to worry about renewals. And it's because that's been my experience too. When I had a problem with a tenant, I really tried to work it out with them. I really tried to figure out a way that we could meet our mutual needs. And I was able to do that and live in New Paltz because that's a supplement to my income. You know, I don't make a lot of money. I'm not a big time landlord. Even if I was, I wouldn't be as cruel and as vicious as the description in this piece of legislation says. I really felt very, very harmed by the fact that I was being put into this category of this greedy, evil person with some level of animosity towards people who really helped me with my income. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way. And I think it's pitting people who wouldn't ordinarily be pitted against each other. So I would start out by saying that you really need to change the language so that it's not just as divisive as it is. I would also say that you really need to think about how are you defining that 5%? I don't raise my rent. I have a tenant 9 years. I raised his rent once 3 years ago. Okay. I had another tenant 5 years. I never raised his rent. Okay. So I think the idea that 5% increase is somehow going to appease landlords who don't really care about the 5%, that's not the issue. I think the real issue here is that you have legislation that I learned about because I'm an activist, because I learned as part of a three-part package of legislation called Compassion in New York. Part of that legislation was about the New York Health Act. Part of that legislation was about parole justice. And when I read part of the legislation that included group restrictions, my eyes opened wide and I said, wait a minute, I don't have this kind of problem in New Paltz. So why would I be advocating for that? The people who live in New York City, the people who live in Albany, the people who live in Buffalo, wherever they're advocating for that, it may be a real problem. And I really, really do believe that yes, rents will go up. Rents might need to go up, but they don't need to go up 5% a year. And I agree, my first reaction was, that means I'm gonna have to start thinking about raising my rent 5%, right? And I think it's not fair to put us in that category, but most important, I think it's not fair to create legit policy without really having a
1 minute warning
discussion with the people who are involved. I mean, if I don't know about this, happening in New Paltz until 2 weeks ago that I got a letter saying that I'm one of those greedy landlords, would I support this? I said, wait a minute. That means that none of these landlords and a lot of the tenants really haven't gotten together to talk. So then I thought, well, now what's happened with the landlord tenant board? I asked them, was this included in the landlord tenant board discussion? And I was told no at the village board meeting when they presented this. So I really would say that, you know, we don't need to rush this through, okay? And if this is such a good law, and people are so opposed to it now, why don't we take more time to talk about it? Why don't we also think about, well, if this is gonna work, maybe we can try it. If you think it's gonna work, maybe we can try it. Why don't you propose, I propose, having a sunset piece on this? Why not say, hey, let's do this for 2 years, and then it could sunset. And if it works, then we don't need to sunset. If it doesn't work, then we change it. But I really do think that you should not rush this through without common communication with the people who are most affected by this. Landlord tenant board should have been discussed.
Maggie,
You know,
start to wrap up.
So, okay, Maggie's gonna leave. Maggie's not leaving New Paltz. I'm coming back to the next meeting if there's another one on this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the Landlord Tenant Relations Council actually did, you know, get consulted and is in support. Robert Gabrielli. Yeah.
Oh, the landlord tenant board, oh, wait a minute, there's an important public clarification. Are you saying that the landlord tenant board approved of it?
Yeah.
How many people are on that board and how many people voted on that? Is that a public record that I can find?
I guess we'd have to look.
Committee at the present time.
Yes, there are.
Well,
Stephen
wait,
Preston. So
anyway,
can we go on?
Maybe you can answer the question now, because I'm not trying to do that.
I want to make sure because we have like another hour of this and then a meeting to do. So
So I guess what you're saying is landlords and tenants got together on this landlord tenant board, and they said, yes, this is good.
yeah, they went through it.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was consensus.
Yeah, is there consensus? Was there any minority opinion?
There was no one against it.
Please tell us who the landlords were.
It was Stephen Preston. So Robert Gabrielli, please step up. Order, please. We need this comment.
Yeah.
So there's one out.
Robert Gabrielli, please make your comment. The clock's about to start.
You're not speaking about it.
Please don't be rude. Please don't be rude.
There's one landlord on the landlord tenant council.
Yes. If anyone wants to volunteer, come through, but please, like, his clock has started, so let's go.
Not my clock, no.
No, don't be rude.
I won't speak if you don't want me.
Can you
You're
go?
not recognized. You can sign up.
Meeting
You're
you
not
can go
recognized.
after, yeah.
All right, the stenographer's ready.
Do we have like affirmation that we'd like to hear from the one landlord who is on the landlord tenant relations? I'm not a landlord.
Can we, wait, no, so point of order, everyone, we have a comment and then we'll have Ben and then we'll have meeting. And then we'll have the submitted ones in advance. So going on.
So my name is Robert Gabrielli, spelling, I think. So I'm a resident of New Paltz. I have been for a lot of years. So I was on the town board. I was there when they passed the master plan. I was a appointee to the state of New York when and I served for 4 consecutive governors. The last one being the fellow who's leaving now. And I've seen some laws enacted. I've seen how they write laws. I've been with people who were in bill drafting. And I know what it takes to make a law, general outline. I think you guys made some real mistakes, and I'd like to point them out now. The first thing is, first of all, town justices don't have mandamus. They can't force you to do or refrain from doing something. They can only put you in jail or say, that's how much you pay in a civil matter. So I see some stuff in here that's looking at town justices saying what's reasonable, what isn't reasonable. They can't make those decisions. So take all those things and take them right at the county court or superior court. And it's going to cost you $3,000, $5,000 just to find out what's reasonable. So that doesn't work. You talk about preemption. I know preemption. Preemption is when a larger government regulates something, a smaller government, and a village is the smallest, cannot contradict those laws. We have laws, real property law, I get this, like 4 state laws. There's just been some amendments made to automatic renewal for things not involving real estate. But this law is an automatic renewal of a lease. Here's something. Black's law that makes this definition, it's really easy. An agreement between 2 or more parties creating obligations that are enforceable or otherwise recognizable at law. The term of the lease, the time period, is an essential element of the lease. You're taking away the basis of the lease. You can't do that. You can't say every lease is an automatic renewal. It's just blatantly, it's interference with a contract, which is a tort. As far as I'm concerned, you're going to have a hell of a time explaining it to a judge who's going to be sitting on this. Really. This law says the rent increase is limited to 5%. Let me say something. You guys are all smart. I've seen this kind of behavior. Let's pass a law. We'll pass an unpopular law. How do we do that? Well, we make it as general as we can, and Maggie, you hit it on the head. You pass a law, 5%. That's pretty good, 5%. So then what happens is a year or two later, you put a little notice in the, we're going to amend local law number 129. We're going to amend 129-18A sub 1. Nobody knows what that is. And we're going to amend it. You're going to have a quick public hearing. Boom. You're going to be down to 0.5%. And even if you are pure of heart, even if you are, you can't dictate what subsequent boards are going to do. So why are you throwing this bomb in this panel and saying, here, live with it? I'll make this real quick, but I do want to say one thing.
Wrap up.
Yeah, I will. You know what? I'm 75 years old, lived in this town all my life. Went to school here, went to high school here, went to college here. I was a police officer in this town. Got married, raised my daughter. What's that?
You taught here at the middle school?
Taught here at the middle school. Oh, my God. I know New Paltz. I know New Paltz. These guys here, when Michael said that this is, he wants to make history with this law. Right. And when he said he wants to see it bring civility to landlord-tenant relations. Madam Mayor, you should have shut this off right then. You should have just shut him down. I've never seen anybody insult my town like that. And damn it, I don't like it. And when the other guy called Lenny Loza a liar, he's had 4,000 tenants.
4,500, please.
Sorry, but you know what? That guy's a meathead. He's a genuine, certifiable meathead. And the last thing I will say is this. You say this law is, let me get the exact wording. It's quote, good cause eviction law is recycled from the proposed New York State Senate bill that did not pass. My God, these are the bozos that gave us the no bail law, and even they wouldn't swallow this.
All
but
right.
New Paltz will.
So Ben Miller can speak.
That's gonna be hard to top, man.
I'm going to try.
I know.
Hi, I'm Ben Miller. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I've been around not as long as some, a little longer than others. I did a little quick math after Len did his thing, and I've had over 1,000 tenants over 20 years. I think that gives me some right to speak. I think the largest problem that I'm seeing here is the communication issue, and it's what really I think is upsetting a lot of people. It certainly upsets me, and I would encourage you, as I said to other people, to try to think about this in the light of maybe a less stressful industry. For example, if you were to pass a law that affects every restaurant owner in the village, would you feel it necessary to speak to some of those restaurant owners prior to passing that law, or would you just go ahead and do it? I would imagine that you would get a group of restaurant owners, even though it would affect their customers too. You'd have customers that get involved and you have restaurant owners that get involved, but you wouldn't just arbitrarily try to affect an entire industry in the village. And landlording, by the way, is much bigger than the restaurant industry in New Paltz, you know this very well, and just try to randomly put something through without getting adequate input. Now, we did hear that maybe one landlord on the landlord tenant committee was involved in this decision, and I'd be very interested to hear what they have to say when they bring it up. But the reality is we have a lot of landlords that represent a lot of property and a lot of tenants here that are all telling you for multiple reasons, this is a bad idea. This is going to harm tenants. This is going to harm the community. And the simplest way I would say if we can move forward from here in a productive manner is to have a committee that's specifically meeting to discuss this law that has multiple landlords on it, multiple. It would be great if you let anyone who wanted to be on it, because from what I hear and from my personal experience, the landlord tenant committee, as much as you might say, begging for landlords, that's not how I've experienced it. It's been actually very difficult. I interviewed for that committee, I don't know how many years ago. I was much younger and sillier then, but I interviewed for that and I was treated like I was applying for a bank loan. And by the way, I did not qualify because of the fact that I live 1 mile outside of the village limits, even though I've lived in the village for, I don't know, more than a decade. So in any case, it would be great to have a real committee that's going to focus on this law, that's going to go through it point by point, that's going to address the actual data that nobody has seen about, is there a true problem here with good cause evictions? Is there a true problem here with people wanting to stay and landlords not allowing them? Find the actual data, chew it up between the tenants, chew it up between the landlords, chew it up between the village officials and anyone else that's involved in the process. And then you'll come out with some actual useful information. New York State didn't pass this. New Paltz shouldn't pass this. This is not the way to pass a law. This is certainly not the way to have the community on your side. We should have been informed about this the same way that the students were, right? Questionnaire, information. Hey, we're considering doing X, Y, and Z. We'd like to collect your data on this. We'd like to hear how many evictions you've had and all these kinds of things. And we would have been more than willing to volunteer this information. Everybody here is wasting their time sitting at this meeting for multiple hours. None of us are getting paid to be here, but we've chosen to be here because we think that this is important. And most of these people are in agreement. This is going to hurt the village. You are not helping the people that you think you're helping. Thank you.
Great. Next we have Nadine.
I'm sorry, what was her name? Did you get her name?
My name is Nadine Thomas.
Thomas, thank you.
I am the chair of the
Wait,
landlord.
I don't, okay. Nadine Chairman? Yes.
I'm the chairman of the Landlord Tenant Relations Council. And I would say, first of all, just to clear a few things up. The council was not consulted. We were not involved in the writing of this bill, but we did discuss it at the last meeting. And I mean, there are 4 of us. Okay, you want to, I'll just say that right now. There's 1 landlord. There are actually, anyway, I'm the chair. I'm a homeowner. I'm not, I was a tenant for many years in New York City, but I'm not a landlord or a tenant right now. I'm a neutral person. That's why I'm the chair. And I would just say that everybody seems to have some idea that the Landlord Tenant Relations Council has some kind of power. I mean, I'll tell you what I do. I get emails from tenants who are having really awful problems. Obviously, none of your tenants, because you all are really great people. And I do know some of you, and I know that you're really great people and great landlords. But some of these tenants, I mean, my heart breaks for some of them. And all I can do really is make them aware of the law as I know it. I can refer them to other people. I can refer them to inexpensive legal help. But, what else can I do? That's all I can do. So just understand that. And when I say that we would love to have volunteers, I mean, please, or just come to the meeting, participate. I've only heard from 1 landlord. I've been the chair since December, and I was made the chair just because there was nobody else on the council. I mean, everybody left. There were only 2 of us, and now there are 4 of us. Thank God. But it's really you know, like, let us know. But that's why I'm here. I mean, I want to hear what, you know, like what the landlord issues are, because I only hear from tenants.
No,
No.
no, this is not a back and forth. Can we let her finish, please?
And I would just say too, that this is a work in progress. My impression is that this is far from finished. I mean, you know, obviously all of your input is important, and I hope that it's valued. I think it's valued by, you know, like by the village board who are working on this. So, you know, like everybody's talking about it, like this was already done, you know, like it's gonna be rammed through. I don't know. Do you know that? I don't know. Maybe it is. I think that's an assumption you're making, but, you know, I'm new to the village, actually. I've only been living here 3 years, so I don't know. But anyway, you know, like, I just wanted to clear a few things up about it, because there seems to be an impression that there's some kind of board that has power. No, we just, you know, try to help tenants, and if landlords come to us, we try to help landlords. That's all.
All right, so, sorry, it's not a back and forth. So next we have, I think that's it for in-person comments, unless there is any other one that didn't get on the list. All right, we have to read through our submitted comments.
Very short.
Do you mind if we have to keep going with the comments, you know, and then we could discuss this some other time or after, you know?
Can you simply join that landlord tenant council, or is there an application?
Oh, yeah, to join, send a letter of interest to assistant@villageofnewpaltz.org.
There's an application process, but.
Just like with anything else, yeah. And then the board will have you have you up during a meeting, and we'll talk, and yeah.
It had the law, I don't know what it was then, but the law does allow for landlords to live in the town.
All right, so we have a comment.
How many are you gonna read?
Is there 10? Okay, so
There's a lot.
there's a
way
lot.
more than 10.
And I'm gonna need all of your help too. So what was that? We have to read through them. So my name is Eunice Draw. I went to school. Eunice Draw. EUNICE, draw, like drawing. I went to school here, SUNY New Paltz, lived here in the village for 3 years post-graduation. I have seen many members of my community bond with one another and with the earth beneath them, in addition to building identity and confidence through the culture of skateboarding. Oh, this is her skateboarding thing.
These are
Moving
all
on.
the public comments.
Oh, they're not in an order?
They're not, because we got so many and they came in at like 6 p.m.
Okay, this one's from Jeff Goldberg. To whom it may concern, for the vast majority of my life, I accidentally just skipped through another one, but we'll do this one first. For the vast majority of my life, I've been a renter of both houses and apartments. I've also owned my own home. Below are my thoughts regarding the proposed new good cause law. I am fully in favor of any law that offers protection to the consumer if the law is both fair and impartial and is applied equally to all. Tenants need protection from unscrupulous landlords who sometimes try to take advantage, raise rents capriciously, or try to force out a legitimate tenant who is living up to the terms of their lease agreement. That said, I'm not in favor of protections for tenants who do not live up to their legal agreements and who take advantage of either a landlord who is operating in good faith or a situation. Tenants who do the right thing should be protected. So should landlords. Jeff Goldberg. All right. And then this one is from Fahim Haider, Haider. Yes, housing is a commodity, but in these trying times, we must view housing as a human right. We are still living through a pandemic ravaging our communities. Rates of viral transmission are higher in many parts of the country and across our local communities now than they were in the early summer last year, before the federal government developed, generated, and distributed life-saving vaccines. Through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the federal government had an eviction moratorium on the grounds that to deny our friends and neighbors safe and adequate housing was to deny them life. That argument and that appeal continues. Indeed, in combination with skyrocketing prices of housing, some other appeals and protections seem necessary. I offer public comment to support just such protections. I am the New York State Democratic Committee member for the 101st Assembly District, a vice chair of the Orange County Democrats and chair of the town of Montgomery Democrats. And all my conversations across these political fora involve questions and arguments around fair and affordable housing. Those conversations are belatedly turning to the question about housing as a space to adjudicate human value. This is a good, humane turn, but please know that among these roles, I am also a graduate of SUNY New Paltz. I'm a friend of the people in the village of New Paltz, and I know, and I know that so many of its residents are just getting by. With 3/4 of its residents are renters, we as a community of friends and neighbors need to protect those renters from becoming houseless during trying times. As the stock of housing becomes more scarce, it is incumbent upon us all to support this proposed draft local law to amend Chapter 129 of the code regarding housing to include good cause eviction. We need to make sure that renters are not placed in danger for no fault of their own. The evictions follow good and just cause. Okay, I read the Jeff Goldberg one. This one is from Phil Erner. E-R-N-E-R. I support good cause eviction in the village of New Paltz. In Kingston, where I stand as a candidate for Ulster County Legislator District 6, increasingly many residents are being displaced without good cause given by landlords. I hope that New Paltz's passage of a good cause eviction law would encourage the rest of Ulster County to do the same. Sincerely, Bill Erner. Does someone want to read Amanda's?
I will.
Page 3.
This is by Amanda Sistenstein, Sistenstein. I lived in New Paltz for 20 years. Before relocating to Kingston. I still work and do community service in New Paltz.
We can email these to you.
I was gonna ask you, that'd be great, but it's not taken now, but you're gonna.
I'll email all of these to you. It's actually a link in the agenda. You could get any of them, yeah.
I still work and do community service in New Paltz. I moved because my landlady was selling the building I lived in, and it was the last place I could afford in New Paltz without being the weird 40-year-old living with college students. During my time in New Paltz, I served in the Tenant Landlord Relations Council twice. I've been a tenants' rights advocate for over 20 years. Being a renter currently means, pandemic and moratorium aside, that you risk having to move every year. A landlord can decide not to renew your lease for any reason. This makes it very difficult for people to build a life. If a person does not have a car, this is an even more daunting reality. You have to make sure you can walk or take public transit from where you live to the grocery store, the laundromat, and to work. Renters tend to have the low to moderate income, which already limits where they can live, even before considering transportation limitations, even more so for the elderly, ADA, or others with limited mobility. Housing is a right. Everyone deserves safe, affordable, habitable housing. However, housing is also a commodity that is subject to fluctuations in the market, property tax changes, and the whim of landlords and other considerations. Right now, we are seeing unprecedented hikes in housing costs due to the influx of individuals from metropolitan centers. In other words, being a renter is precarious enough, and there is just not enough control over housing costs. There is little to no laws that guarantee safe, affordable, habitable housing to all. While that is not a problem we can fix with one law overnight, you do have the power to make sure that the renters who are paying their rent, excepting those covered under the moratorium, suffering pandemic-related financial hardship, who are being good stewards of the residents they have occupancy of, and who are not causing any issues or problems that warrant being forced out of their homes, and have the security, safety, and assurance of being able to stay and not be forced out. Please pass the good eviction law. Next one.
Can I summarize?
Yes.
Karen, please.
Karen Garcia, Garcia. This is Karen Garcia. I live and rent in the town of New Paltz. I would like to support good cause eviction in hopes the passage will provide other municipalities in the state to take action. I have resided in the Bella Terra apartments more than 11 years. Originally constructed as affordable, later sold, and the rent drastically increased. I'm 71, disabled, and cannot afford either the latest increase of $200 a month or the inexplicable demand for another $430 in security.
The landlord has refused to give me any upgrades. There's various other complaints. My daughter, who is also disabled, and I are on numerous waiting lists to subsidize our affordable housing and have been for years. We will not self-evict and we refuse to go quietly. We are so done with being intimidated, and so I suspect are most other people in the same situation. What is the purpose of housing? Is it to shelter people, keep families together, and enable us not only to survive, but to thrive? Or is housing just a place for real estate tycoons and LLCs to park their tax sheltered cash? Please do the right thing and give us most hope and inspiration and courage to me and others like me. So she's in favor of passing.
I think the next two are in the same public hearing. If someone wants to just summarize them quickly for the next couple.
It's hard to summarize without reading it first. So
I know.
I'm trying.
You're doing great. Thank you.
The next name is Nicholas, Niklas Moran, Moran. I have fought for good cause statewide, but have yet to be successful. COVID has ravaged families, and influx of people who move in Hudson Valley are straining already a tight housing market. Everyone should be comfortable in their homes, and we should not fight until housing is a human right. This is Alex Passas, P-A-S-S-A-S. I'm writing in support of the local law, good cause eviction. It makes so much sense to pass this law so renters are not a victim of eviction without good cause. This next one is by Victoria, but I think we heard from her in person.
Yeah, there is one from Eunice that was actually on this topic above Alex's.
Okay. Eunice Straw. I live in the village of New Paltz. I support good cause eviction. We are not protected against the violence of displacement for unjust reasons. It's difficult to relocate as young poor people without being set back financially as a result. I've personally witnessed Alex and many of my friends deal with their own illegal evictions from abusive landlords, as well as cyberbullying and gaslighting from community members who are also landlords. Good cause eviction will help renters, but also work against predatory gentrification, which pushes working class people out of their communities due to rising rent costs. And they support this bill. Is that the last one?
I think there was something from Rich in
Oh,
here.
Rich Stephens. S-T-E-F-F-E-N-S. Rich has a series of questions. Will the local court be willing to make economic rent decisions? Are our courts informed on unconscionable rents or evaluating tenant assets and income streams as they relate to ability to pay rent? And he has some comments. The local courts do a good job following the law and making every attempt to assure everyone in front of them is treated with fairness. Does the village board have any substantiation of unfair or unjustifiable actions by our local judges? State attorneys should handle this, not a new village law. Please point out which neighborhoods or areas of village are or have deteriorated because of evicted tenants, or identify which neighborhoods are at risk if the law is not approved. The vast majority of the village's income comes from real estate taxes. These taxes fund programs and services. This is the bottom line. I see no documentation or demonstration of how this law secures that bottom line interest. Is the village's intent here to affect price control in the market? Is the intent here to supplement a preferred segment of the buyers over the interest of others? Please identify the criteria being used by the village to distinguish between good and bad landlords. Rich Stephens.
Elizabeth LaRose comments really long. L-A-R-E-A-U. My name is Elizabeth LaRoe, having voted and resided as a renter in New Paltz in years previous, as well as having faced unjust evictions in quotes and witnessed unjust evictions carried out against loved ones, I feel driven to comment in support of this necessary amendment to the Housing Standards Code known as good cause eviction. Renters are full human beings and housing is a human right, but all too often you wouldn't know it in New Paltz. And then she shares her story in a couple paragraphs. That's really intense. With a deep regard for human rights, including housing and loving New Paltz as I do, I'm deeply concerned about how local renters and New York students can continue to abide the predatory behavior of landlords. Landlords have the privilege of renting in a captive rental market, and unfortunately, many have exploited that for far, far too long. Reading the new law line by line, it clearly defines and protects the rights of both renters and the rights of investments of landlords. In order to protect the rights and well-being of the 73% of New Paltz villagers who rent, and to protect the character of the village that draws so many students to its college and residents from the region to businesses and events, it's imperative to pass good cause eviction. Again, that was Elizabeth Thoreau. Next is from Joanna Dempsey and Eric Keeling. My husband and I are landlords who rent an apartment in the village of New Paltz. The proposed good cause eviction law sounds very reasonable to us and we encourage its passage. Thank you, Joanna Dempsey and Eric Keeling. This next one is from Laura S.
How do you spell that?
It's just Laura and then S. S.
Okay, all right.
Whoop, I just scrolled down. My name is Laura and I'm writing in support of the passing of the good cause eviction bill. I'm unable to attend the hearing, but I wanted to share a personal story relating to rent increasing and uncertain future this poses. December 2020, with a divorce underway, I needed my own apartment and applied for a studio apartment at Southside Terrace Apartments. The apartment was listed as $850 when I found it. When I went to sign the lease, the rent was bumped to $975, and I was informed they just hadn't updated the listings. It was difficult to even swing that much with my medical bills and student loans, but I needed a place to live, and it was my best chance at a close and affordable apartment, so I signed. I received a letter which lists my first name wrong, by the way, recently informing me the rent will be bumping up to $1,250 for this studio apartment. $1,250 is just shy of the rent my ex-husband and I were paying for a one-bedroom apartment at a complex in Kingston that was well maintained and more than twice the size of this studio apartment. It is worth mentioning that while they bump up the rent and renovate certain apartments, they often ignore things that need to be fixed even when you repeatedly call. My best guess is they take you seriously because they assume we are all college students and will be gone soon enough, which is incorrect and honestly horrendous to consider because even college students shouldn't need to live like this. In reference to issues that go unaddressed, my deck, which has been warped, splintering, and chipping apart since the day I saw it in January before I officially signed the lease. Brought it up numerous times, still have not had it fixed. Eventually I gave up trying. The hot water fails regularly. They replaced the boiler a couple months back after almost 3 days of no hot water, yet it continues to occur often enough. I also frequently notice the water is yellow-brown, which prior to living here, I didn't experience but a few times. All these issues make it all the more outrageous. They increased my rent to $75 above what I signed the lease for. In any apartment I've lived in, rent has never increased more than $50 at one time. The letter Southside Terrace gave me ends with please contact immediately or discuss your plans and a possible early renewal at a special rate, which makes me feel in addition to the rest of the letter that they want me out. The rent increase while my income remains fixed has been causing me great stress and loss of sleep. It has forced me to face the possible reality of being homeless with my 2 cats come December if I cannot find another affordable apartment before then. I make less than $38,000 even working full-time, as I'm sure many of us New Paltz residents do. I have student loans and bills to pay, not to mention cost of food and medical expenses. In closing, please pass good cause eviction. Many in the community, like myself, feel like we are floating in the ocean with no life raft. Passing good cause eviction may be our flotation device to keep from drowning. Thank you for your time, Laura S. The next one is a skate park support letter. So this one is from Quinn Thomas. To whom it may concern, I would like to state my approval for this proposed local law. Having seen, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Thank you, Ari. Having seen many friends push out of the village due to increasing rents without reason that could be seen as good cause, I believe that the minor changes this law recommends will help those without vast financial resources to live more comfortably in our generally inclusive and welcoming community. With 1-bedroom and studio rent now rivaling the monthly rates seen in Brooklyn and Queens and parts of Manhattan, but without the local job infrastructure and salaries to accommodate this rise, something must be done to curtail this potential crisis. Thank you, Quinn Thomas, longtime New Paltz resident. The next one is from Eli Godwin, who's I see is on the Zoom. I don't know if they want to read it.
Yeah, I can,
Okay,
I can read it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Could you timer go for it?
Yeah, sorry, I just didn't know if it was timed out on people speaking, so I sent it in. Yeah, so hi,
Yeah,
I'm
so 3 minutes.
okay, great. I'm writing as a former renter, 15-year resident, current renter in the Boston market, and a current 1-unit landlord. I'm not currently living there because I'm in grad school right now. And I've been renting out my home in the village that I purchased in 2006 from my own landlord. I dearly love and miss New Paltz and come back frequently.
Keep your masks on, please.
I'm in a strange position tonight as a socialist who believes in universal basic income, that corporations are not persons, and drug prohibition should be repealed, siding with the landlords. But this law is so ill-conceived and badly written that I can see no other option. It's a solution in search of a problem that will cause more problems than it would solve. I work in research, and if I tried to make a claim with as little evidence as proponents of this law, I'd be laughed out of town. Below are the reasons I'm most concerned. For starters, the word eviction is being used to describe the mere ending of a mutually agreed upon contract between 2 consenting adults. I'm having an Inigo Montoya moment here. This is not what an eviction is. If a current or prospective tenant finds a 1-year lease too short to provide peace of mind, they're free to ask for a longer one. Gradual rent increases could be built into such a lease. I'd be glad to sign a lease like that if I knew I would not need the property for several years. As others have pointed out, turnover costs money. I've had 3 tenants, and each time someone left, I ate at least a month of vacancy while I cleaned and made small repairs. I'd certainly rather renew leases if I can, but I don't want to be forced to. On that note, as another person so eloquently stated tonight, this law would prohibit me from letting a lease run out on a child abuser or a white nationalist holding perfectly legal KKK meetings in my unit. Right now, letting a contract between adults end naturally is a peaceable way to end a relationship. This law would force the equivalent of a bitter divorce by requiring court involvement. Finally, if the law is meant to solve this problem of escalating housing costs, I believe it will fail abjectly in that regard. I worry this will encourage routine 5% increases each year so that no one ends up getting trapped by the unconscionable clause if they want to bring their rent up to market rates. Take me as an example. I chose to lose $45 a month for a year just to keep renting to a great tenant who I knew could not take a rent increase. There are others like me. I heard from them tonight. In fact, my current tenant, who's awesome, by the way, and I would love to renew her lease, asked me what's wrong with it when she heard what I was charging because I chose not to price gouge during COVID. I could be making $400 more per month than I am. So what happens if I have personal circumstances that require me to actually raise rent to market rates? This law would prohibit that. This leftist still has rights, and this law would curtail them too greatly for any possible benefit to the greater good. Thank you for consideration of my comments and for the work you do for the village.
Thank you. So I think that's it for this list. So let's move on. Anyone here to make a comment on the local law regarding B2?
You have to close that public hearing.
No, we're not keeping it open.
No, we're keeping it open.
You have to motion to extend it.
No, I'm following the usual rules of procedure that, you know, how we operate. So the mayor's never motioned to extend, you know, I know the words, guys, you don't have to be like this for real. So we usually just leave it open. Like, so just so everyone knows, it is open. And the next time the hearing will continue will be on August 25th at 7 p.m. So anyone here for local law B2 that's already been open, we don't have to motion to open or anything. Nope. All right, no comments on that one.
Actually, I am via Zoom, so that's
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Anton, I did not mean to skip over you. All right.
not a problem.
Go for it.
Not a problem.
Sorry for the long wait.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do what you're doing. I know tonight is busy.
I need everyone to just actually be quiet so we can hear our public comments and this other public hearing that's happening. Sorry, Anton. Okay, go for it.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm here to speak tonight regarding the proposed local law to the change of zoning, where I am to do away with B1 and just make a unified B2. I wish to voice my strongest objection to the Village of New Paltz proposal to do away with B1 limited business zoning and replace it with a revised B2 core business zoning. I believe the adoption of this local law will lay the seeds for the complete destruction of our quaint village by allowing for the overdevelopment of existing open spaces. 85% lot coverage, 0 setbacks, and 40-foot building height has the potential to turn Upper Main Street into nothing more than an ugly strip mall. As you know, our home and business, the Awareness Shop, is at 180 Main Street and is known to many as the Purple House. Recently, we spent a great deal of money on beautifying the building. We have repainted, repaired the crumbling driveway, and are working on a number of landscaping projects. Furthermore, we're hoping to replace the aging shingle roof with a new Tesla solar roof that mimics the original slate roof as and when funds permit. It's also home to our spiritual community, the Church of the Eternal Circle, known to many locally as the Wiccans up the street. We often hold circles, what we term religious observances, in our grounds. On many occasions.
Oh, sorry, this is a meeting though. I cannot.
Sorry, Anton.
Okay, I'll pause. I'll pause.
I'm so sorry.
It's
I really want to hear you.
Okay, go on. Thank
Okay.
you.
It's also home to our spiritual community, the Church of the Eternal Circle, known to many locally as the Wiccans up the street, and we often hold circles, what we term religious observances, gatherings in our grounds. On many occasions, we've had to contend with severe flooding of our property caused by runoff from the overdeveloped impermeable areas above us to our east-southeast. I understand that the village too has problems with stormwater runoff, which on occasion completely overwhelms our water treatment plant, causing unintended sewage contamination to be discharged into the Walkill River. Any further development, especially when combined with high occupancy buildings, will only serve to exacerbate the problem. When I learned of the proposed multi-story hotel/restaurant/bar with roof deck that is being planned to be built next door to our property, I was initially horrified. We would never again see the sun through our eastern elevation windows and would be overshadowed by a monstrous, pardon me, fugly building, replete with roof deck where patrons could gawp into our sacred circle from above, beer in hand. Fortunately, I was relieved that this particular proposal was way outside of what is considered currently permitted within the B1 limited district, as this would require as many as 11 variances, which seemed unlikely. However, the proposed local law would pretty much sweep these away in one fell swoop. In fact, one could be forgiven for believing the language of the proposed law has been written to specifically allow this project to move forward, even going so far as to detail multi-story hotels with roof decks. Allowing
You guys, thank you so much for bringing the guys away, but kind of not, I have like a hearing problem where when there's other noise, I can't hear, but thank you.
Sorry, I'm almost finished, I promise. Allowing the overdevelopment of any largely open space is not, as some would say, good for the village. It is not an inner city area. It's a quaint and somewhat quirky village renowned for its inclusivity. This and the area of outstanding natural beauty are the main reason it's become a popular tourist destination. By permitting overdevelopment, the charming character of our quaint and quirky village is threatened with complete annihilation. Once the process is begun, it cannot be stopped. As Joni Mitchell said, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Pave paradise and put up a parking lot. Thank you. That's my time.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else to talk about the B2 local law? All right, now on to the accessory dwelling unit law. And this one was still open, right? Yeah, for a while. Anyone here to make a comment on the accessory dwelling unit law? All right, so no one wants to talk about it, so we'll keep it open as well. What about the zoning map amendments law? Any takers? Anyone here to make a comment on that? Guess not. So we will keep the zoning map amendments public hearing open as well. Now on to regular public comment. Anyone here to make a public comment about anything that's not the public hearings that we had on the agenda tonight? Where are they? Yeah, I can't find them, because I know there were a bunch.
I'm editing it, and now written public comments under that. Regular public comment.
So if I refresh this, it'll tell me.
No, I created a new job.
Oh, so I'm gonna go back to the agenda. Sorry. Thank you. And we will just summarize these very quickly. Okay, so Eunice Straw also submitted a comment in support of the skate garden in Hasbrook Park. Thank you for that. You can read the agenda to read their beautiful thoughts. Good morning. I'm writing. Who is this from? From Jesse Berner. I'm writing to state my support of building the skate garden and project in Hasbrook Park. As a parent to a teenage boy, it is exciting to think of a new option for him to be outside, being active and socializing with friends and other members of the community. It had been a struggle to keep him off screens and interested in other activities. He does have an interest in skateboarding, so having an area outside of our driveway to practice those skills would be a blessing. Having the space so close to town where he can purchase drinks or stop by his grandmother's office makes it ideal. Also, it's close to the fire station in case there are any accidents. I believe it would be helpful to have emergency personnel within walking distance. From the comments I've read from those involved, it seems as though the hardworking people striving to get this done are actively trying to do things the right way and through the proper channels. It's difficult for me to sympathize with the homeowners closest to the park. Not sure how improvements to public space would decrease their property value. And if they want to live in a quieter area, why stay so close to the center of town? Our town is a vibrant place full of life. Can't see trying to dampen that spirit nor fighting against an idea that can benefit so many residents of all ages. I hope we are able to come together to address all concerns and create an amazing space for town. Jesse Berner. I think that was it. Thank you. And now, let's find my agenda again now. Motion to approve the consent agenda as it was amended several hours ago. All in favor? Okay, great. Sorry. And then climate equity and justice related items. I have a whole thing I want to say on that. But I think I'll save it for some other time. Just another thing about housing and the intersection of all the issues. Cody, do you want to come up? And I'm so sorry and thank you.
I tried to warn you, but I don't think any of us knew the extent. You can tell me have a seat.
I like this all the time.
Have a seat.
That was probably a good show that I can just sit and listen to.
So you want to volunteer on the zoning board of appeals?
Yeah.
Did anyone have any questions for Cody?
What made you want to come forward to do in the ZBA?
I was actually reached out from one of the members, Sean, who we've had conversations just about the industry because it's common interest. I always keep up to date on the projects as a weird hobby, just because living in the village and seeing everything going on, I kind of keep tabs on it just for my personal well-being, and we kind of got wind of that. I was unaware that there were so many vacancies, and he asked if I was interested, and we got forward.
Great.
I don't have any questions, just gratitude. It's like all I have.
Yeah, CBA is there's some good folks on this board. And it's a thoughtful done as the liaison to it. So,
okay.
But yeah, thank you. We really need volunteers on all our boards. So it's really wonderful when they're.
Well, and that's I mean, I'm sure you guys cruised over my letter and reference and everything, but I really truly do feel that I have experiences that will benefit us greatly, like the experiences in the industry with codes and zoning and all of that, so.
Great.
It should be pretty good fit.
So do we, or are you all good? Do we have like a specific term or anything like that on the CBA?
I think it's open right now, and then there's 2 alternate seats that are also open. But I think Michael Kearney is moving, so that, and he was filling out a term that actually only went to through 2021. So.
How long is the term?
Well, actually, you know what? He was reappointed in June, and so it would be 5 years, 2026.
You have to read it.
So are we going to put Cody in one of those full positions? Is that what it is?
Is that okay, Tony? Like, you want to be a full voting member?
Yeah.
Other than an alternate? Great.
Do you want to make the motion?
I move that we give Cody a full spot on the ZBA.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cody.
Wow,
Wasn't it? It's been a fun meeting.
Yeah, and
Next
next
one will be
time
fun.
Much shorter, much shorter.
Sometimes.
I always.
Sign in the room's full.
Yeah.
Means you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Sweet. So yeah, next topic.
I will add you to, there's like an email list. I'll add you to that, so you'll just automatically start getting emails. And yeah,
Thank you so much again for volunteering and everything.
Thank you, Cody.
Yeah, if you have any questions, let us
Yay.
know.
We're here.
All right, we're done with this.
All right, so next we have these, the engineering and administrative services qualification statements for the CDGB Small Cities Funded Project. What, I know, I always accidentally like say CDGBs, but it's a challenge. So were there actions needed for this though?
Yeah,
Was
so
what I
you guys
couldn't
really need to fill out these score sheets. So you need to fill out the score sheet. You could do it live here in person. You don't have to do it individually. It's a collective sheet. But yeah, that's the idea.
We have to do it tonight.
My computer just died.
Yeah.
I wish I could be of more service to you,
Yeah.
honestly, but this is like something that is up to you.
No, exactly.
He is, but he's not, well, I don't know if he's doing it, but.
He's not with us, but he's not part of quorum anyway. So
I mean, it is kind of laid out here.
yeah, it is. Like, I don't see any reason to not be putting the maximum points, but
Well, the MWBE stuff is a reason.
right, okay.
Although, let's see, is that might not be part of the point, actually. No, it's not.
It's just, so there's basically this point system. It's like successful background in the administration of CDBG funded projects. Maximum points for that is 40. The next topic is comprehensive scope of services. Max points is 30. Availability of services as per program schedule. Max points is 15. Cost of services, max points is 15, and that all adds up to 100.
Yeah, I think that you'd be good to do that. And I can fill it out.
Yeah,
and
and
put
so
your signature on it.
yeah, that
in the
sounds,
PDF.
I am great with that. Or
Okay.
if you guys are, unless you had some other schema that you're into. So I would like to, go with the maximum point schemes that adds up to the total of 100 for this and give you permission to sign.
Move to do that.
Do I have the motion to do that? Motion to go with the regular point scheme laid out and for Ariana to sign my signature? All in favor? Aye. All right, then we've got our resolution for this meetings, bills and claims. I move it. All in favor? Aye. Planning board report, if there is any.
I was out of town last week. so
Okay.
I was unable to-
Thank you. That was nice and brief. And then ZBA report.
So, we are still working on 85 North Chestnut for a height variance and an area variance. We're waiting for seeker from the planning board, but a resolution is being drafted. The area variance for 5 Plattekill Avenue is also being drafted. And 107 Main, which is a new one, which was the old Murphy's. Scheduled a public hearing for the 14th of September. And we still need more volunteers for this committee. So anybody thinking they might want to help us out once a month, we would love to have.
Thank you for that update. And I think that's it for everything, right? We don't need executive session or anything. So, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, aye, aye.